Chapter 1055. Can it store magic power? Chris asked. It can be used as a container for magic power, Kenley answered. Neither of them understood what List was talking about. In the end, it was List himself who said, "The calabash can be seen as a spellcaster. Can I use it to create spells that I can cast at will?" Cast spells at will? The two of them still could not figure it out. List could only continue to explain helplessly. He had a broad field of vision, but the others did not. Can we use the gourd to create a single-use spell that can be cast by ordinary people? This was equivalent to a magic scroll. Of course, there were no magic scrolls in this world. Your Majesty, are you saying that we can cast spells through the calabash? Chris asked. Kenley also understood, but she quickly denied. The calabash is too small, and it can't store much magic power. It can only be used to cast ordinary spells, but it's not that useful. Also, it'll cost a lot of materials to carve an automatic magic circle. This isn't the biggest calabash. There should be bigger ones in the garden. Maybe they can store more magic power to cast advanced spells. Also, they don't have to be offensive spells. They can be used as a power source for mechanical devices. List thought of a device and continued, if the magic bicycle is driven by the calabash, does it mean that it can run continuously? Even ordinary people can ride it? The magic bicycle and its inventor, Gundolf Truth, had been featured on the cover of Grand Arcanist before. That's a good idea. But the magic power stored in a single calabash is still too little. Then let's connect more calabashes. Connect more calabashes? Kenley was surprised. The more calabashes we connect, the more magic power we can store. Maybe it can really replace the existence of spellcasters. The next step is to use the gourd as the center and expand your thinking to develop its value, List instructed when he saw that the two of them understood. He believed that the combination of the calabash and magic power could be seen as a kind of electricity. Maybe the calabash could bring about the age of electricity and make people's lives more convenient. Of course, compared to the ubiquitous electricity on Earth, magic power was still a luxury that only the nobles could enjoy. The reason was simple. The source of magic power could only be provided by a magician. Other than the Guild of Magic funded by List who could provide mana on a large scale, the other nobles simply could not afford to support mages, especially in this era where the magic net was shrinking. In fact, if a chi wasn't a magic shooter, List wouldn't have thought about developing magic at all. No matter how rich the development of magic was, it was not as good as riding a dragon. However, since a chi had become a magic shooter, he also had to develop magic for a chi, so that a chi could go to the next level. The electrical era of magic was not extravagant, as long as some convenient magic items could be developed, such as magic elevators, magic water heaters, and so on. As a dragon-rearing family, a noble family that stood at the pinnacle of luxury, List naturally wanted to enjoy life. I'll tell Crazy the idea of the magic elevator later and ask her to develop it as soon as possible. It'll be best if the magic elevator can run through the entire palace when the Palace of Stars, Sun, and Moon is completed. But a chi said that she's going to build a small magic transmission circle in the palace. It doesn't seem that she needs the magic elevator, right? There was no point in thinking too much. Even if he couldn't use it himself, it would be good to give it to the servants. He returned to Fire Castle, called the gourd sprite, Klein, and went to the gourd plantation to inspect it. He used to think that gourds, a crop, had no use except as a container, but now it was different. The effect of the gourd's magic storage had doubled its value. List, Ella is really annoying. It's not an elf butler, but it always likes to make noise in your ear. It's really an annoying elf. Klein complained on the way out of Fire Castle. It was fed up with the thorn sprite, Ella. List chuckled. You don't have to care about it. He let Ella serve as an elf butler at the stage of the Great Elf, of course, because of Ella's strong will, but also because he hoped that Ella could bring about a catfish effect, stimulate the elves, and promote the development and evolution of the elves. Now it seemed that it was still effective. Klein was stimulated by Ella and evolved into a great elf. I don't want to pay attention to it, but it's really annoying. I play with it and it always interrupts me. I don't like it. I want to leave Fire Castle. I want to live in my gourd garden. Well, I also want to take the gourd sprite and the gourd sprite worm out. I like them. There were not many elves who liked their own kind, and Klein was obviously an exception. In its separate worm room, there were 2 gourd sprites and 7 gourd sprite worms, all of which it took the initiative to do. The 2 little elves also liked to follow behind Klein, playing pranks and causing mischief in the castle. The gourd sprites were very naughty. On the contrary, although Ella had a bad temper and a domineering personality, it rarely made mischief. If you really don't like living in Fire Castle, don't live in the plantation. After all, there are still some dangers outside. When my palace is built, there will be a large elven palace. At that time, you can have your own separate garden, and then you can enjoy peace. Well, I'll bear with it first. When can the palace be built? In another 6 months, I will definitely be able to move in before this year's festival. That's okay. When he came to the gourd plantation, Liszt mainly came to inspect the growth of the gourds here and the different kinds of gourds produced. There were many kinds of gourds in the primeval forest. Some were long, some were large, some were thick, some were hard, some were soft, some had only 1 cavity, and some had 3. No matter what kind of gourd it was, they all grew under the influence of Klein's worm stalk. When Magic Eyes was cast, apart from a few worm stalks, there was no mana retroaction. He went to the side of the largest gourd and picked up a large gourd, almost the size of a watermelon. I don't know if this type of gourd can store magic power. If it can, it should be able to release a high-level spell at a time, right? Unfortunately, magic power does not have a gaseous, solid, or liquid structure. There is no possibility of liquefaction. No matter how much it is compressed, a gourd cannot store much magic power. Magic power was not matter. In the wizard's triangular theory, magic power, spirit, and matter were equal existences. The particularity of magic power might be similar to light, with wave-particle duality. Because magic power was a part of the weave, whether it was the magic power of the weave dragon or the magic power of dragons and other creatures, they all existed in the form of a net and a field. Suddenly, there was a burst of inspiration in his mind. Gourds can store magic, which is very unusual. According to the triangular theory, ordinary plants are ordinary matter, and it is impossible to block magic power. So what is the structure of this gourd that magic cannot penetrate it? Chapter 1056. There were many things in the world that could block magic. For example, glutinous rice juice was a very outstanding magic resistance material. Almost all large castles were built with glutinous rice juice. Such castles could resist magic and aura attacks very well, and they were very sturdy. However, glutinous rice juice was only anti-magic and could not block the penetration of magic. Basically, there were not many items that could block the penetration of magic, even gems and crystals, which were products of the dragon. The magic of gems could last for a long time, but the reason was that the gems had a condensing effect and could automatically absorb the free magic in the air. Crystals also had this effect, but it was very weak. Once the magic of the dragon was exhausted, it would lose its effect. Therefore, the ability of the gourd to store magic suddenly awakened Liszt. He wanted to find out the hidden secret and why it could isolate the existence of magic, which was different from matter. It seems that while the Guild of Magic develops the value of the gourd, I also have to contact a Chi and let her follow up on the secret. I can also try to explore it myself. I always feel that this small gourd hides a big secret, and it is related to my opportunity. Unfortunately, the gourd was really just an ordinary gourd. After observing it over and over again, he did not find any more clues. He could only put it aside for the time being. He looked at the gourd spirit, Klein, who was swinging on a rattan and said, "Klein, you really are my little lucky star. The gourd you farm is very important. Seeing that you are not happy in Firewood Castle, why don't I teach you a song?" "Okay, I like singing." Klein's eyes lit up. "Come, learn from me. Calabash Brothers, 7 flowers on a vine. Not afraid of the wind and rain, la 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 la." Liszt sang. Klein followed suit, Calabash Brothers, 7 flowers on a vine, but halfway through the song, it shouted, not good at all." "Liszt, do you think I am stupid? Singing needs to rhyme, but yours doesn't rhyme at all. It's not as good as the Return to the River Castle that old Carter taught me. Listen to me." Klein was very contemptuous of Professor Liszt's songs. But it was true that Calabash Brothers was very pleasant to listen to in Chinese, but when translated into Serpentine, the rhymes were chaotic and they were stuttering. After all, these were two completely different language systems, and their aesthetic designs were as different as day and night. Soon, Klein's singing voice was heard. "Look, how beautiful the ocean is. What a thrill. Look, this natural scenery is so intoxicating. Look, the orchard on the hillside is full of lipstick-like raspberries. Everywhere is filled with fragrance and warmth. But you said goodbye to me, abandoned your lover forever, left your hometown forever. Did you really have the heart to not come back? Don't abandon me, don't make me suffer any more. Return to the River Castle, come back." This was a very popular folk song of the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom. It was also very popular in the Sapphire Duchy. Basically, anyone born in Sapphire could sing this song. Butler Carter was a Sapphire person, and he taught this song to Klein and the other elves in his spare time. Klein's voice had a childish taste, like a child singing, but the Return to the River Castle was still very pleasant to the ear. Clap 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 clap, Liszt was not stingy with his applause. "Klein, you are very talented in singing. But you also need to work hard on farming. I hope that one day you can grow a gourd magic ingredient. The gourd is very important to me. You have to pay attention to it, understand?" Feeling Liszt's ardent expectations, Klein nodded. "Of course, I will grow a magic ingredient. I am definitely better than Ella." His resentment towards Ella did not diminish. Seeing this, Liszt could not help but shake his head. Ella, this catfish, was indeed very qualified. There were no elves in the castle who did not hate it. Even if there were a few thorn sprites, they also hate Ella. Ella would not treat the other party gently just because they were of the same species. However, when Liszt returned to Firewood Castle and inspected the sprite worm room, he found Ella standing on the window of her worm room, looking at the distant mountains in a daze. There seemed to be a touch of sadness in her mood. "Ella, what are you looking at?" Liszt could not help but be concerned. Although he now had so many dragons and so many elves to pay attention to, Ella still had an indescribably important position in his heart. Ella looked back at Liszt, shook the pleated collar of her small frac habillere, and solemnly said, "I am thinking about the future." Pfft! Liszt almost laughed, but he held it back. "Oh, what future are you thinking about?" "Evolution." "Evolution?" "Yes, Liszt, I have matured. During my time as an elf housekeeper, I have examined my shortcomings. Although I have been recognized by old Carter, Mawson, and others in terms of management, Achi also said that I am talented and a rare elf." Ella boasted seriously and then said, "But I also have to review my shortcomings, that is, I am not a dragon elf, my authority is not reflected. Especially Carly and Yachty, these two coquettish bitches, always hinder me from carrying out my orders." Carly was a man-eating tree dragon elf, and Yachty was a buckwheat dragon elf, often despising Ella. "What are you going to do?" Liszt nodded and asked seriously. He knew very well that Ella's intelligence could not be judged by ordinary elves. Great elves such as the giant algae elf Parker, the gourd elf Clyde, and the pea elf Ash. Although their IQ already had the IQ of a teenager, they were more of a sentimental person. They could learn knowledge but did not know why. Only dragon elves could think deeply, showing the IQ and EQ of humans. However, Ella had shown it now. In addition, there was another great elf who also showed this specialty, the mangrove elf Nami. Nami liked to wander around and work, while Ella tended to be a housekeeper of the castle. At this moment, Ella said seriously, "List, you said that only by liking a dragon can a great elf evolve into a dragon elf. So I decided that from now on, I will try to like a dragon. Although I don't like your dragons, I have to do it." List was a little speechless. Could it be forced to like a dragon? So how do you like a dragon? More contact. Ella obviously thought about it deeply. "I plan to resign as the elf housekeeper of Fire Castle and focus on getting in touch with your dragons. Fire Dragon Leo, Invisible Dragon Bard, Light Emerald Dragon Issen, Grey Iron Dragon Orn, Mountain Copper Dragon Marta, Water Dragon Walter, Aluminum Dragon Connor, and Bone Dragon Winnie. I will try to get in touch with them." Well, in that case, let's start with Bard. He didn't know if Ella's forced love would work, but it was worth a try. Ella nodded, then narrowed her eyes. "Wow, I'm going to announce my resignation to the elves now." Chapter 1057. All of you, come out. All elves come out, I have something important to announce. I'm talking about you, dawdling, come out quickly, or I'll tear out your front teeth. Ella shouted loudly, causing the entire worm room area of the castle to be in chaos. Numerous elves and big elves flew randomly in the aisle and made a lot of noise. It was even noisier than the market in the market. Woola! What the hell is going on? Ella is a bully. Chirp chirp chirp. Pop, 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 hum hum hum. What a nasty big elf. Ella, are you going to discuss the art of binding with me? I can't stand this big elf who likes to toss and turn. Can't you just play honestly and find ways to disturb my peace all day? The buckwheat dragon elf Yati stretched. She was reading in her worm room and didn't want to pay attention at all. As a dragon elf, and a dragon elf that migrated from the Iron Dragon Chain Palace, Yati's heart knot may have been untied. But with Ella in the way, she was unable to integrate well into the new environment. Therefore, the identity of the elf butler did not fall on her head. Of course, she was not interested in being a butler. But this did not prevent her from looking down on Ella. How could a big elf manage a dragon elf? She wanted to ignore the annoying Ella among the elves, but she couldn't avoid it. She would see her every day. Fire Castle, with many elves and small rooms, was already at full capacity. But there were more than 20 big elves, more than 200 little elves, and more than 1,300 sprite worms living here. With so many elves, it would be terrible to encounter a bad-tempered Ella. Every time it was a trivial matter, it could be tossed around like a chicken and a dog. Today was no exception. Although Yati did not go out of the door, she pricked up her ears and listened carefully, trying to figure out what Ella was up to. When he returned, he would be able to humiliate this loathsome fellow. Quiet. Quiet for me. I'm talking to you, what are you looking at? If you look again, I'll dig out your eyes. Ella's voice was always so energetic, and Yati curled her lips in disdain. She thought to herself, just because she is List's first elf, she is arrogant and boundless. Sooner or later, she will fall. After a long period of scolding, the aisle finally calmed down a little. It had to be said that Ella's deterrence was still good. At that moment, Yati heard Ella shout, "Let me tell you something serious. From today onwards, I officially resign from my position as the elf butler to List." There was a moment of silence. Following that, loud cheers erupted from the walkway. Sand jumping Karaka. Woola. Gallop, 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 you should have resigned long ago. I see the light, the sky is bright. Chirp chirp chirp. Countless big elves and little elves clapped their hands and cheered excitedly, as if the serfs had turned over and become their masters. Some elves even took out jade powder and scattered it on the walkway to celebrate this beautiful moment that was worth remembering for the rest of their lives. Of course, there were also some fairies who quietly grabbed the jade powder that had fallen to the ground and happily hid it on their bodies. Among them, there was a little elf who was beside himself with joy. It flew directly in front of Ella, made a face at Ella, stuck out its tongue, and said, "Blue blue blue." However, the next moment, Ella, with her hands on her waist, made the little elf fall from heaven to hell. She opened her 5 fingers, and her little pink hand swung up fiercely, and then slapped down fiercely. Thud! A crisp sound. The little elf fell from the air like a cannonball and smashed into the ground. She was in a daze and then burst into tears. The celebratory scene gradually cooled down with Ella's slap and the cry of the little elf. Ella put her hands on her waist again and loudly spat at all the elves in front of her. Wow, don't think that you can be free just because I resigned from my position as the elf butler. Remember, my resignation is only temporary, and I will come back. Cherish the few moments of enjoyment now, and when I come back. With a snort, Ella turned around and left a powerful word. Arrange. Her transparent wings fluttered, and she had already left the bug room area and flew out of the castle without looking back. This journey was like a boundless sea and sky, a leap of fish and a flight of birds. It was an assault towards a broader level of life. It was its persistent thinking about the future, and it was also breaking the shackles that fate had placed on itself. She left simply. Leaving the elves in the aisle, looking at each other. The scene that should have been celebrating was dominated and shrouded by fear at this moment. Many of them had not been in Firewood Castle for a long time, but Ella's image of a bully was deeply rooted in the hearts of the elves. From day to night, from reality to dreams, it was like a ghost wandering over the castle. Gallop gallop gallop. A heartless elf, after being dominated by fear for a few seconds, became heartless again. She grabbed the jade powder that she had worked hard to collect and flew back to the bug room. Like a chain reaction, the other elves returned to normal. They stared at each other, quarreled, and the atmosphere gradually returned to normal. However, they didn't know what was going on, but a few elves vaguely felt that things seemed to be changing. What is Ella going to do? The great elf, Ash, wrapped the rope around her wrist and thought for a moment. Without thinking about the result, she quickly put Ella behind her, returned to the bug room, picked up a scale of the gray-mouthed iron dragon on, and continued to sleep. The buckwheat dragon was also curious about why Ella quit, but it was too lazy to ask such a nasty elf, so it continued to read. Hello, Bard, I am Ella, List's favorite great elf. Ella flew to Bard's ear and introduced herself loudly, trying to attract the others' attention. However, Bard just raised his eyelids, then closed them again and continued to lie on the top of the moon mountain to bask in the sun. Although List had told it to get familiar with Ella, it was not a good idea. However, the dragon had its own character. It simply looked down on little things like elves that were smaller than ants. Reluctantly showing up was already giving List face. I want to like you, Bard. You should behave well. Only then can I like you. Ella stood on Bard's eyelids and said seriously. However, the next moment. Bard didn't know where he got a handful of smoke grass, put it between his teeth, and slowly rubbed and chewed. In an instant, the unique smell of smoke grass permeated the top of the moon mountain. Ella's eyes widened. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. On the 4th second, it suddenly covered its nose and flew away while screaming, I will never fall in love with a dragon with such a stinky mouth. Never. So, Ella, you're giving up on Bard? List was inspecting the progress of the construction of the Palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars. Listening to Ella's endless complaints, he asked helplessly. "It's too smelly, List. How can you stand it? Aren't you afraid of the smell?" List laughed. "I'll get used to it." "I can't get used to it. I want another dragon to like it." "Well, then change to the mountain copper dragon Marta. It's at the back of the mountain. I'll send you there." Chapter 1058. For the time being, the mountain copper dragon Marta was quite favored by Ella. At least the dragon and the elf could get along harmoniously. It was mainly because Ella was talking to herself. Marta didn't even like to talk to List, let alone a great elf. Someone was sent to protect Ella. List didn't stay in the Fire Kingdom for long. He spent several days in the magic laboratory, looking for possible clues with Chi, who was studying the gourd in her spare time. The gourd is very strange. Judging from the microscopic level, its structure is not unusual, but at a more microscopic level, there must be a different structure that blocks the penetration of magic. Brother, Chi can't sense the more microscopic level for the time being. She needs some equipment. If you need any equipment or resources, just tell me. List simply said. He was a little anxious. The smoke mission had been delayed in the stronghold for more than half a year. Every day, he looked at the unchanging smoke serpentines. Mission: 202 choices of fate, guidance and prediction. You have grown from a small rural lord to the king of a country. In the time when the Fire Kingdom is about to be established, perhaps it is time to think more deeply about some issues. Please touch the stronghold. Reward: the favor of fate. His heart gradually became irritated. Originally, the kind of smoke mission that happened once every few days or weeks was really refreshing. He often felt the benefits brought by the power of fate, but it also made him seriously dependent on it. Now, he hadn't received any reward from the smoke mission for more than half a year. His heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat, and he always felt uncomfortable. This was probably the case of it being easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. When there were no smoke missions, life could go on as usual without any discomfort. But now that he was used to the smoke missions, he would be very unhappy if he didn't get any benefits. However, he also understood that it was not a good thing to rely too much on the smoke missions. The delay in this stronghold mission might be a good time to get rid of this dependence. He still had a very clear understanding of this. The smoke missions are the embodiment of the power of fate in me. It is a kind of talent of mine, and I am not wrong to rely on it. I just need to develop in a comprehensive way. I can't rely too much on the smoke missions. There must be a limit to everything. In short, previously, the smoke missions were too frequent. Now that the smoke missions were taking too long, it was best to neutralize them. There were all kinds of gourds of various sizes on Chi's laboratory table. She took out a document and said, Chi has begun to design a device that can observe the structure of matter at a more microscopic level. My brother once said that the combination of convex and concave lenses can form a telescope or a microscope. That's right, I told you. When Chi was studying astronomy, she was already good at developing telescopes. She made many telescopes of various specifications, but she rarely tried to develop microscopes. She had always relied on her subtle perception of magic power. Now that she can't sense it, it's a good time to develop microscopes. List sighed in his heart that Chi was becoming more and more powerful. At the same time, a trace of doubt flashed in his mind. With your sensing ability, I'm afraid that the degree of subtlety you can sense can reach the atomic level. If that's the case, the precision of the microscope you'll need to reach a higher level. He didn't know much about microscopes, but he seemed to remember that he had learned about microscopes in middle school. His teacher had told him that optical microscopes could only magnify objects by more than 1,000 times. Those atomic-level substances were all seen with an electron microscope. As for smaller electrons, nuclei, and the like, List didn't know what kind of microscope was used to see them. He also couldn't understand whether scientists really saw electrons or if they measured them using scientific methods. If the precision of microscopes isn't enough, a Qi will develop a magic microscope. A magic microscope? Yes, didn't my brother say that magic power is similar to light and has wave-particle duality? Since an optical microscope can magnify and observe matter, a magic microscope should also be able to magnify and observe matter. Perhaps with a magic microscope, a Qi can extend her perception to a more microscopic level. All right. List had to admit that he really couldn't keep up with a Qi's train of thought, and he really couldn't understand how magic power could be made into a telescope. In fact, he knew the principle of an optical microscope at best. He didn't even know the principle of an electron microscope, let alone the magic microscope that a Qi was now conceiving. So he simply responded, "As long as you have an idea." Waving his hand, he turned around and left gracefully. The theory of the magic isolation of the gourd was handed over to a Qi to study, and List immediately focused on the construction of the territory. When April was about to arrive, the development committee finished the spring plowing work and organized a territorial planning of Blazing Island according to List's will. The territorial planning was List's idea of the development of the territory, and it was based on the administrative divisions on Earth. List, after a comprehensive consideration, the committee divided the Blazing Island into 21 territories, and each territory is basically equal in size. Of course, the northwest half of the territory is more desolate, and the area is relatively larger. The southeast half of the territory is more fertile, and can support more people, and the area is relatively smaller. In the administrative office, Lee William instructed the clerks to hang a meticulously drawn map on the wall. With the sextant to measure latitude and longitude, and the World of Warcraft as a mount to look down from the sky, drawing a map was a relatively easy task for the Blazing Kingdom. This topographic map of Blazing Island was accurate down to the mountains, rivers, every road, and every castle. Other than this kind of map, there was also the topographic map of contour lines that List had pointed out. The committee was even preparing to create a huge sand table and place it in the Palace of Stars, replicating the entire Blazing Island, and even the entire northeast corner of the legendary continent. There was a map on the wall. The Blazing Territory was divided into 21 territories, which were equivalent to the provincial units. Of course, most of the territories were simply divided, and the location of the territory's central city was specified. They had not really been developed. Currently, the Blazing Island had basically absorbed all the Moonkill natives, and only a small number of native tribes were still hidden in the deeper primitive forests. List's gaze swept across the territory. Currently, there were roughly 9 territories that had been developed and named. Reed Territory, Central City Reed City, Whirlpool Mountain Territory, Central City Firewood City, Whirlpool Estuary Territory, Central City Estuary City, Dragon Pit Mine Territory, Central City Dragon Valley City, Jade Mountain Territory, Central City Jade City, Mermaid Territory, Central City Mermaid City, King Territory, Central City Fire King City, Sea Reef Territory, Central City Reef City, Endless Volcano Territory, Central City Phoenix City. Among them, the Mermaid Territory was basically in the sea, and so was the Mermaid City. There was no land territory. The Endless Volcano Territory was on the other side of the Endless Volcano Range, and the Phoenix City was built on the edge of the Phoenix Sycamore Forest. Currently, it was only the size of a small town. After the territory is planned, the construction of the roads must also keep up. Although the teleportation portal will play a main role in the future, normal roads also need to be built. If the teleportation portal is too busy, the burden on the teleportation portal will be too heavy, and it will easily collapse. Therefore, in this aspect of planning, I still need to trouble you, Father. Don't worry, although you have already established your own Blazing family, you are still my son. My feelings for this country are linked to you. Yes, the Blazing family and the Tulip family are just names. Our bloodlines are linked together. Immediately. The father and son looked at each other and smiled. Everything was understood without words. Chapter 1059. Liszt had underestimated Qi's efficiency. While he was busy inspecting the construction of the territory, Qi had already created the theoretical magic microscope in just a month. Sir Achilles' Ides provided the design, and I led a group of outstanding great mages to work day and night on it. After repeated polishing, we finally completed a magic microscope that can be used by magic shooters, Laird Truth excitedly introduced. During his stay in the Fire Kingdom, he had quickly integrated into the Guild of Magic. The high-end magic experiments conducted by Qi were all eye-openers for him. He felt that the truth he had come into contact with before was simply superficial. This was the true holy land of truth. Although they were both magic shooters, his respect for Qi had reached the level of calling himself his disciple. It had to be said that the knowledge from Earth that Liszt had explained to Qi might be slightly different from this world, but it had greatly broadened her horizons. It allowed her to stand at a higher level and examine the meaning of magic. It also meant that she was closer to the truth. That was why her research topic was so shocking and mesmerizing to Laird. Laird organized his knowledge and made up for a large amount of magic foundation for Qi. Now, Qi not only had profound basic knowledge, but also had great foresight. Her magic attainments definitely surpassed those of the magic shooters of the Moon Empire and Sun Empire in ancient times. The magic telescope, which was very complicated for Liszt, only took Qi a few days to come up with a complete idea. Laird and other mages who had many years of experience in making magic equipment would then operate it. The magic telescope quickly appeared in front of Liszt. It was a huge metal device that was 3 meters tall. It was engraved with dense magic runes and embedded with several sets of complex magic formations. Although the magic power represented by low, high, and supreme magic comes from the same source, the microscopic particle movement is completely different. Ordinary mages can only communicate with low magic power and cannot use the magic telescope. Only magic shooters with high magic power can barely use it. When Sir Achilles rides the unicorn, his magic power will reach supreme magic power and he will be able to use the magic telescope perfectly. As Laird explained, he couldn't help but glance at Charlie the unicorn. This unbelievably beautiful unicorn was truly an enviable existence, especially when paired with a mage. They complemented each other very well. Big brother, Qi has already used a magic telescope to observe the minute structure of the gourd. Qi was about to explain in detail when she suddenly noticed that Ryld and the others were still around. She then ordered without holding back, "Sir Ryld, please leave the laboratory for now." "As you wish." Laird was not angry. He bowed slightly and left the laboratory with the other great magicians. In the Guild of Magic, Qi's position was unique. After they left and closed the door of the lab, Qi said, "The detailed structure of the calabash is very interesting. Brother, guess what came to my mind when I saw this structure?" She had a faint smile on her face. Only when she was with Liszt would she reveal her innocence. Weave? Nope. Dragon? Not really. Then I can't guess. Liszt expressed his helplessness. Qi smiled and said, "Let me give you a hint, mermaids." Mermaids? Liszt tried his best to think, but he couldn't figure out what mermaids were related to. In the end, he made a random guess. "Did you think of the devil?" "No, brother, it's the sea." "Sea?" "Yes, Qi can't feel any difference on the atomic level of the calabash. But on a more subtle level, it's like the sea, constantly surging. When magic comes into contact with the sea, it will be blocked by the sea. On the other hand, the subtle level of ordinary matter is not like the sea, but like a layer of stone. Magic can easily pass through it." Qi described the scene she saw through the magic telescope. She could imagine the observed matter as a filter. Some filter nets were built with large stones, and magic could easily pass through them. Some filter nets were built with gravel, and magic could also easily pass through them. Some filter nets were built with fine sand, and the penetration of magic was slightly slower. Some filter nets were built with even finer dust, and most of the magic was blocked. On the other hand, the filter net of the calabash was made with seawater, and there was almost no gap for magic to pass through. After understanding what Achi said, List couldn't help but frown. So, Achi, do you think the structure of the seawater in the calabash has anything to do with the barrier? He didn't care what the calabash looked like. What he cared about was the information about the barrier. Brother, Achi has made a general judgment about the barrier after half a year of research, Achi said seriously. The barrier is the boundary between matter, spirit, and magic. Let's take the invisible dragon Bard as an example. Its barrier is obviously the barrier of matter. Then, Achi analyzed Bard's situation in detail. Bard could pass through matter, the boundary of matter, and the world beyond matter. On the surface, it seemed to be an act of breaking the barrier, but in reality, it was not. Bard's ability didn't exceed the limit of the barrier of matter. The real barrier of matter is not the tearing of the boundary of matter or the transformation of stone into gold, but another level. Like the weave dragon, it doesn't tear the boundary like Bard, but it itself is enough to pass through matter and exist simultaneously in the world beyond matter, the boundary of matter, and the world beyond matter. This analysis made List thoughtful. Achi continued to analyze. Let's talk about the subtle level of the calabash. The seawater-like structure can block the penetration of magic. From Achi's point of view, it doesn't reveal the barrier of matter, but the barrier of magic. At least, it's magic that can penetrate this barrier. When magic can penetrate the calabash, it means that the barrier in this aspect has been broken. List asked, if this is the barrier of magic, does that mean that if I train with Leo, we should follow this train of thought to mold magic to penetrate the barrier represented by the calabash? That's the general idea, but Achi hasn't thought about the specific training details. Brother, don't be anxious. Achi still needs to refer to more clues and finally crack the real secret of the barrier. Although I'm anxious, I can endure it. List gave Achi a reassuring look. I'm now standing at the peak of power in this world, and I'm only 22 years old this year. There's still a lot of time left for me. Achi, we both have a long life ahead of us. I'm not anxious, and you don't have to be either. Yes. Achi nodded vigorously. List did his best to coil her beautiful blue hair. Although the smoke mission was like a fishbone stuck in his throat, he could only treat it as overcoming his dependence on the smoke mission. Perhaps after overcoming it, he could see more clearly what the power of fate was. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. Perhaps the blessing of fate reward of the smoke mission is to let me understand the power of fate and think about the power of fate? It was unknown. But his mind had quickly calmed down. How many Dragon Knight had not broken through the barrier since ancient times? Even if he couldn't complete this smoke mission, his life had not been in vain. Now was the right time to devote all his energy to the construction of the kingdom and lay a solid foundation. Chapter 1060. Touching the barrier still needed to wait. Time flashed by like a white steed flashing past a crevice. Sapphire calendar year 157, Duke Skola Cornflower of Snow Wind Mountain passed away. Before his death, Duke Skola announced that his title would be inherited by the second prince, Spike Carter Cornflower. The eldest prince, Spike Cornflower, immediately rebelled and claimed that the second prince, Scott Cornflower, had killed his father, so the title of Duke belonged to him. So the two sons of the late Duke each claimed that they were the new Dukes of Snow Wind Mountain and applied to the Cornflower Gemstone Dragon of Snow Wind Mountain for arbitration. The Cornflower Gemstone Dragon did not care about the fight between the two brothers. Then the eldest prince asked for help from the Yellowstone Kingdom, and the second prince asked for help from Yevich Water Peanut, asking for help from the Eagle Kingdom. Snow Wind Mountain fell into a civil war, and a large number of civilians were secretly transported to Adamantine City by the mercenary group organized by Yevich to stay in the Fire Kingdom. The arrival of the civilians of Snow Wind Mountain was a powerful supplement to the population structure of the Fire Kingdom. So, List instructed Yevich, make sure the civil war in Snow Wind Mountain continues for 3 to 5 years, and continue to migrate people to our Fire Kingdom. Your Majesty, please rest assured, everything is under control. Yevich, who was already riding a high-level dragon beast, Pegasus, said confidently. As long as you complete this mission, you will be the new Marquis of the Fire Kingdom when you return. List promised benefits. He liked to use benefits to drive his followers. The Pegasus from before was a reward for Yevich's years of work in Snow Wind Mountain. After the migration was completed, he would be conferred the title of Marquis. This former member of the Dragon Knight program, after a long time, had become a perfect Sky Knight. He was worth putting in an important position. I will not disappoint your Majesty. Yevich was in high spirits. He had already married the daughter of a local marquis in Snow Wind Mountain. His career and love were both successful, and he felt that his life had reached its peak. It was also with the help of this marquis that he could be like a fish in water in Snow Wind Mountain. And under his recommendation, the Marquis had already become List's follower and defected to the Fire Kingdom. All these plans were carried out in secret by the Development Committee. List only showed up and had lunch with the Marquis. In June, year 157 of the Sapphire calendar, after spending 2 months with the mountain copper dragon Marta, the thorny sprite Ella finally could not take it anymore and complained to List, Marta is a stupid dragon. All he does is eat, drink and sleep every day. He's just like a pig in a pig farm. He should be slaughtered and eaten. What's wrong? You don't like Marta? List asked with a smile. Ella pinched her waist, her cheeks bulging with anger. I will never like this stupid dragon, wow. This sentence seemed familiar. 2 months ago, it also described the invisible dragon bard in this way. Now, it seemed that even if Ella bit the bullet, it was not fated with the orichalcum and the invisible dragon. Then I'll take you to Aluminum Dragon Connor. Marta and Connor's dragon nest are not far from each other, so you don't have to move again. When you come into contact with Connor, take the time to open up the Thorns plantation, and then choose a worm room in the Palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars. Fire City was a big agricultural city, and a lot of plantations had been opened up. However, with List about to move into the Palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars, some plantations would also be relocated, including the Thorns plantation. The soil near the Fire King city was more suitable for shrub plants like thorns. I know, Connor, I've seen him. He's a little ugly. Ella had not even started to get in touch with Connor, and it was already a little disgusted with Aluminum Dragon Connor. This made List not expect it to like Connor. He felt that Ella had not reached the edge of evolution at all, and it was just its personality that was mischievous. However, List was willing to let it do its mischievous thing. What if it evolved? One must know that thorns had auxiliary potions, and the value of thorns was far higher than ordinary potions. The Guild of Magic had recently graded the potions. The lowest level was the ordinary chaotic potion, referred to as the hybrid potion. This type of potion was an ordinary potion that could be used by all knight, and the effect was average. The next level was the ordinary single-type potion, referred to as the single common potion. This type of potion was divided according to the magic attribute. It had a good effect on the knight with the same combat attribute, but it had no good effect on the knight with different combat attributes. The next level was the ordinary specific type potion, referred to as the top potion. This type of potion was actually the single common potion, but it was limited to 2 categories of light and dark attributes. It was because these 2 types of potions were rare and relatively more valuable. Whether it was single common potion or top potion, they could be called separately, such as water common potion, fire common potion, light common potion. Above top potion was the strong potion, referred to as the strong potion. For example, the platinum potion of the rose and white rose family was the strong potion, and the effect of the night was very strong. Above the strong potion was the auxiliary potion, referred to as the auxiliary potion. Above the auxiliary potion was the dragon potion, referred to as the dragon potion. The dragon potion did not have much effect on the human knight, but it was of great benefit to the dragon. For example, the red dragon water of the rose and white rose family and the fire dragon water of the flame family were all dragon potions. Mixed common potion, single common potion, extra common potion, strong potion, auxiliary potion, dragon potion, these were the 6 levels of potions. Subdivided, strong potion can also be divided into strong common potion, single common potion, extra common potion. The dragon potion could also be divided in this way, but it was not necessary because strong potions and dragon potions were too rare. In August 157 of the Sapphire calendar, the underground of the Fire Kingdom was fully equipped with magic light bulbs. After the underground was lit, it meant that the city was running smoothly. So the development committee organized the first batch of immigrants. These immigrants were well-behaved civilians from major cities. They would become glorious residents of the Fire Kingdom. In addition to the civilians, there were also the knight sequences of the Burning Legion that moved to live in the Fire Kingdom. For the time being, the Burning Legion had 5 sequences: Orders of Chivalry, riding the shovel-toothed giant elephant; Orders of Chivalry, Cardinal Squad, riding the cardinal; Burning Orders of Chivalry, riding the black blood horse; Blizzard Orders of Chivalry, riding the blizzard beast; and Pegasus Orders of Chivalry, riding the Pegasus. Of course, the various sequences had not yet been developed, and the number of members was very small. After the Fire Kingdom officially began to operate, the surrounding supporting facilities also began to gradually operate, and the most important Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace quickly completed the main project. Mr. Carter personally led a large number of servants from Firewood Castle to the Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace to preside over the interior decoration of the palace. As for the wonders around the palace, it had been handed over to a Chi, who would personally design and supervise the construction. A flying moat, a vertical elevator, a small magic gate, an aerial park, an artificial sun, moon, and stars, a colorful crystal cover, a dragon sculpture of equal proportions, an eternal torch, an endless cumulonimbus cloud. A Chi had a lot of ideas. The resources needed to build these wonders would be astronomical. Therefore, Liszt put forward his own suggestion: a Chi, why don't we build the dragon sculptures and vertical elevators of equal proportions first, and the other facilities can be built slowly later when there is time. A Chi was a little unwilling. But she still nodded understandingly. A Chi will listen to brother. So, Liszt quietly reached out to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. The landlord did not have any surplus food. Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor Mobile Version Website. Chapter 1061. Sapphire Calendar Year 157, September. The new season's development order was being presided over by the development committee. Liszt was bored at Flame Island, so he went to Fertile Land for a stroll. This was the place where Nimr the lion lived. He hadn't found any traces of this legendary wyvern several times before, so he had always been unwilling to give up. Now that he was back, he wanted to try his luck and see if he could run into Nimr the lion. Even if he couldn't, he could still pick up some elves. In this season, the elves that should be bred had basically all matured. Riding on the invisible dragon bard and activating crystal white track, the mana of the entire fertile land was arranged in an orderly manner in his special vision and highlighted. However, the light of the elves' mana retroaction was very weak and easily covered by the light of World of Warcraft's mana retroaction. Most of the light he saw along the way was emitted by World of Warcraft. Nourished by mana, World of Warcraft's meat was very nutritious, but it might not taste better than the meat of livestock raised by humans. In particular, the higher the level of World of Warcraft, the harder the meat was to taste. Looks like this trip was wasted again. I didn't pick up anything. Bard, let's go back. After 2 rounds of fertile land, List helplessly prepared to return. Bard suddenly screamed, Wuxia. He discovered something unusual on the ground in the distance and told List through the mind as one that there were ripples in the space on the ground. There must be something special there. As he grew older, relying on the red dragon water and large amounts of potions, Bard developed extremely fast, and his abilities became stronger and stronger. Although he was only over 80 years old, he was not far from adulthood. The Holy Dragon's powerful spatial talent made his observation skills more and more outstanding. Oh, then what are we waiting for? Let's go and take a look. He flapped his wings. Like a flashing arrow. In the blink of an eye, the man and dragon arrived at the place where Bard discovered something unusual and searched around. This was a lush forest with a thick layer of rotten leaves on the ground. There was no light of mana retroaction around, and it looked like an ordinary slope in the forest. However, List and Bard were connected as one. Since Bard had discovered the anomaly, List naturally discovered it as well. He would not ignore it easily. It should be here. The flow of magic in the air has caused ripples in the space. There must be something unusual buried underneath. Could it be the giant lion Nimia? A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and the blue skull pattern on his face was flashing. With a gentle call, the blue skull pattern broke out of his body and turned into a dragon made of bones. Winnie, please. You don't have to be so courteous, Your Majesty. This is what I should do. Bone Dragon Winnie shook her forelimbs and stabbed them into the layer of rotten leaves on the ground. Like a super large, super fast excavator, Bone Dragon Winnie kept waving its front limbs, digging away a large amount of mud. At this moment, the layer of rotten leaves suddenly burst open, and a huge creature suddenly jumped out from the mud pit and let out a mighty roar. This figure was like a small mountain. As it roared, it had already brandished its huge claws and slapped at the Bone Dragon Winnie. Come back, Winnie! List called out. Bone Dragon Winnie instantly transformed into her magic form and projected onto List's body. Their minds were connected, and they transformed into a set of bone dragon armor and a bone dragon sword. Bard flapped his wings and flew high into the sky. Wearing the bone dragon armor, List coldly stared at the huge creature that jumped out from the sky. It had the appearance of a lion, but its mountain-like size was something that no lion in World of Warcraft could achieve. It could almost compete with Dragon 1. It did not have a mane, but its fur was thick as if it was wearing a layer of fur coat. Its 4 limbs were thick and strong, and its head was big and its tail was short, making its body seem somewhat bloated. Roar! This huge lion raised its head and glared at the invisible dragon in the sky. Its pair of green eyes flickered with a chilling and callous light. As expected of giant lion Nimia. It's similar to Piero's description. It should be a super dragon of the earth element. After all, it likes to live underground. But its size is really too big. It's already bigger than the lightning dragon turtle, and the density of its magic power is also off the charts. List even felt that giant lion Nimia's magic power might very well belong to the category of super magic. Let's test it out first. As the Holy Dragon Knight, List would not be afraid. He swapped the Bone Dragon Sword for the Thunder Fury Dragon Spear and directly used Snow Mountain Collapse to descend from the sky. The invisible dragon that walked on the material boundary seemed to flash toward giant lion Nimia. The Thunder Fury wrapped in majestic dragon fighting energy stabbed directly in front of giant lion Nimia. At this moment, giant lion Nimia actually jumped high and dodged this attack with agility that was disproportionate to its size. Sonic boom. List's first attack missed, so he followed up with another. His attacks were like a tidal wave. Giant lion Nimia did not retreat. Instead, it leaped and pounced forward, clashing head-on with the holy dragon. But its movements were agile, but the invisible dragon was even more agile. It twisted its body and dodged the attack. Then, cooperating with List, it thrust the dragon spear forward. The tip of the spear did not stab the aiming eye, but the other's back. Roar! Giant lion Nimia let out an angry roar. The dragon spear stabbed into its back like iron wire stabbing into cowhide. It felt a huge stagnation and obstruction resisting the power of the spear tip. But in the end, giant lion Nimia's skin did not successfully resist the dragon spear's piercing, and a small hole was forcefully opened in its back. Bright red blood gushed out, making it even angrier. Its green eyes turned red. It's a bit prickly. This is indeed the super magic level of earth element magic. List's gaze lingered on the small wounds on giant lion Nimia's body that were starting to recover. He had already obtained a lot of data. Giant lion Nimia has already surpassed the level of super dragons. It might be in existence on the same level as the phoenix and unicorn. Being on the same level as the phoenix and unicorn meant that it had already reached the same level as dragons. The short exchange just now also proved this point. Being able to not suffer any injuries under the powerful attack of the invisible dragon knight was enough to prove its strength. Giant lion Nimia is so powerful, which means that its skin is really valuable. If it is made into magic equipment, it might be able to resist the attack of the dragon knight. I can't miss such a treasure. Leo, come out, let's do something big together and slaughter this arrogant giant lion Nimia. Roar! The fire dragon pattern on its chest lit up and turned into a ball of flames that soared into the sky. Countless sparks scattered, and Leo's huge black and red figure slowly appeared. Almost as soon as it recovered its body of flesh and blood, it charged towards giant lion Nimia and clashed head-on with giant lion Nimia. Its front claws ruthlessly tore giant lion Nimia's skin, causing blood to spurt out violently. Giant lion Nimia also bit Leo's shoulder blade. A few black and red scales cracked. What flowed out of Leo was not blood, but red flames. Shadow. List rode the invisible dragon bard and escaped into the material boundary. When he reappeared, it was already when giant lion Nimia's abdomen was wide open. The fury of thunder fiercely stabbed into what should have been a soft abdomen. However, what surprised List was that the skin on giant lion Nimia's abdomen gave him the same feeling as if iron wires were piercing into cowhide. The stagnation force was so great that it was simply unimaginable. No wonder it's called the unkillable giant lion Nimia. With the thickness of its skin, even the dragon knight would have to stab it 30 to 50 times. List lamented, but the killing intent in his heart was becoming more and more exuberant. Unfortunately, no matter how thick your skin is, you're just a target to be beaten. Tomorrow, I'm going to wear your skin. Through the spirit and soul connection, the invisible dragon bard and the fire dragon Leo responded to List's will at the same time. Wuxia! Roar! Chapter 1062. The battle was not as evenly matched as imagined, or it could be said that the giant lion Nimia was not as strong as imagined. Its methods of battle were pouncing, biting, tearing, and pulling. Occasionally, it would use earth magic such as earth tremors. However, its skin was really too thick. Dragon Sharp's sharp teeth and claws could only cause minor injuries. Even though List controlled Bart to become one with the dragon and unleashed the powerful dragon battle aura, he still couldn't deal too much damage to the giant lion, Nimia. After a full 10 minutes of battle, although giant lion Nimir was covered in blood, he was still full of energy and showed no signs of exhaustion. He's really tough. List clenched his teeth and continued to command the fire dragon Leo to fight the giant lion Nimia while he controlled the invisible dragon bard to roam around the periphery and launch sneak attacks. He wanted to see if he could find the enemy's vital points and kill it in one strike. However, the giant lion Nimia did not have any vital points on its body. Even his chrysanthemum had been pierced twice by List. Apart from the large amount of blood loss, there were no other unexpected effects. Piercing its eyes, its eyelids quickly drooped. Instantly, as if piercing steel, only a white mark was left. When it opened its mouth to roar, List tried to stab it through its mouth, but the giant lion Nimia quickly closed its teeth and almost bit off Thunder's fury. "Looks like you really don't have any vital points. If that's the case, I'll torture you to death even if I have to." The battle heated up for a full 20 minutes. Indeed, none of the attacks managed to seriously injure Nimia. However, the small wounds stacked on top of each other, and even the same wound was stabbed several times, still caused Nimia's aura to weaken. His supreme mana was lost too much blood. If they continued to grind on for a while longer, the giant lion Nimia would die in front of them. All of a sudden, the mountain-like creature sank heavily into the ground, fusing with the earth at a speed visible to the naked eye. A spell that can merge with the earth? Trying to run? Although he didn't know what kind of magic it was, it didn't stop List from interrupting Nimir's escape. They communicated in their hearts. The fire dragon Leo stomped his feet heavily, and abundant dragon magic surged toward the ground. The powerful fire magic quickly broke the balance of the giant lion Nimia's magic. At this moment, the behemoth bounced back from the ground as if it had a spring installed on it. He was also splashed with mud. It twisted its body and sank into the ground again, but with another stomp of Leo's foot, it bounced back again. After repeating this a few times, the giant lion Nimia finally understood that he had nowhere to run. It couldn't run fast on the ground, and it couldn't use the escape spell, burrow. He could only wait for his death. "Bard, come again. This time, take its life." Holding the dragon spear tightly, dragon dochi and dragon magic mixed and violently poured into the dragon spear. However, the next moment, the giant lion, Nimia, suddenly lowered its head and lay on the ground, allowing Leo to hit it. It did not resist at all. List didn't know what was going on, but when he heard it, he suddenly realized that this earth elemental supreme magical creature was submitting to him and begging for mercy. It was a very strange kind of communication. It was not a spiritual communication, nor was it an illusion. There seemed to be a strong emotional appeal in his voice. "Submit to me?" List was stunned. He hadn't considered this option at all. Because his impression of the giant lion Nimia was that it had thick skin and couldn't be killed, he wanted to try to kill this legendary dragon from the beginning. Moreover, he coveted the skin of the giant lion Nimia. This kind of skin could even block the attack of a dragon. It was definitely a super armor material. With the size of the giant lion Nimia, it was definitely not a problem to use the skin to arm a few orders of chivalry. Wearing the lion skin armor, Orders of Chivalry was absolutely invincible. However, after getting the attitude of the giant lion Nimia, he quickly changed his mind. "No, just a piece of lion skin, how can it be as cool as taming a dragon as a mount?" This giant lion Nimia was not a super dragon, but a real dragon, the same level as the phoenix and unicorn. Of course, it was not as magical as the phoenix and unicorn. Its only characteristic was that it could take a beating. "You really want to submit to me?" List asked while keeping his guard up. He was not sure if the giant lion Nimia could understand his words. However, the giant lion Nimia quickly let out a woo-woo sound, conveying its meaning to List. It was really willing to submit, because List had the ability to kill it. "It's good that you can understand me. Then, after you submit to me, how can I guarantee that you won't betray me?" Woo-woo. The giant lion Nimia expressed that it was a proud undying giant beast Nimia. Once it submitted, it would not betray him. Moreover, it was willing to protect List, as long as List provided it with food. List believed it. The powerful world of Warcraft, dragons, and others all had unquestionable arrogance. They rarely had that kind of cunning character that went back on their words. Even if it was an evil dragon, once the battle of the soul was successful, it would obediently cooperate with the Dragon Knight. As long as the evil thoughts of the evil dragon could be killed in time, the evil dragon would still be arrogant and would not betray him. "Very well, I accept your submission." Roar. The giant lion Nimia stood up and glanced at the fire dragon Leo, who was glaring at it like a tiger watching its prey, and the invisible dragon bard under List. Then, it turned its head and licked the wounds on its body. With the nourishment of its saliva, the wounds that were still losing blood quickly recovered. It shook its fur, and the blood that had formed scabs immediately fell off, returning to its previous orange color. However, its entire mental state was still a little sluggish. Although it was not seriously injured in the battle, its mental state was greatly depleted. Since you have already submitted to me, your name can still be Nimia. However, you need to leave the land of fertility and return to my territory, Flame Island, with me. I need you to guard my capital as its guardian beast. List temporarily arranged for the giant lion Nimia to be a watchdog. To be honest, the giant lion Nimia was not very useful. Perhaps with its attainments in earth magic, it could level the land or something. However, it was more of a symbol. Although the status of a sub-dragon in the legends was not as high as that of a dragon, it was still a kind of glory. It would be a pearl that adorned List's crown. The giant lion Nimia nodded like a human and followed behind the invisible dragon, galloping toward Realgar City. Its speed was not fast enough, but this was only relative to a dragon. For a normal World of Warcraft, its running speed was already very fast. They traveled during the day and rested at night. After a whole week, they finally arrived at Realgar City. Its hill-like body made the knights of Realgar City nervous from afar. Fortunately, List had already informed the territory, so there were no misunderstandings. Standing on Nimia's head, List's silver shining armor was especially bright, and the scarlet cape on his back gave off a strong gust of wind. His appearance was extremely eye-catching. The knights and civilians who built Realgar City stopped what they were doing and looked up at the giant lion Nimia. What is that? What a big lion! His Majesty's glory! Giant lion Nimia, the legendary giant lion Nimia, a sub-dragon. A sub-dragon is nothing. His Majesty has so many dragons, lifting a giant lion is a piece of cake. This is His Majesty List. Great! Amidst the exclamations of the subjects, List rode on the giant lion Nimia and stepped into the magic gate of Realgar City, leaving only the aftermath of the earthquake. That inconceivably imposing figure was destined to become the central topic of conversation for a very long time in the Realgar City's residents' leisure time. Chapter 1063. Nimia's residence in the Fire King's city caused a huge commotion. However, the commotion came and went quickly. After all, the residents of the Fire King's city could often see dragons flying in the sky. Compared to dragons, the reputation of the giant lion Nimia was still a lot weaker, even though its size did not lose to that of a dragon, and it was a sub-dragon on the same level as the unicorn and the phoenix. After abandoning the sub-dragon title, List recently picked it up again and made it a separate level. He originally thought that the sub-dragon was a false rumor about the super dragon, but it turned out that it was not. It was just that people confused the sub-dragon with the super dragon. The sub-dragon was very rare, and the super dragon was also very rare, so it was understandable that they were mixed up. Nimia, what do you think about the nest? Since he had already subdued it, List was willing to respect Nimia's opinion. Roar! Nimia expressed that he liked soft soil, which was convenient for him to use magic to move his body underground. As an earth element super magic creature, he could completely blend into the soil, just like how phoenixes could blend into magma and flames. That was a special form of magic. Is the soil around the Fire King's city not soft enough? Roar! Obviously not enough. Then you can search around here yourself. In the end, Nimia chose a forest adjacent to the Pegasus farm, about 40 kilometers away from the Fire King's city. According to List's instructions, he often went to the Fire King's city, circled around the Sun Mountain and Moon Mountain, and then enjoyed the delicious food prepared for him at the foot of the Sun Mountain. Compared to raising a dragon, raising Nimia was much easier. He only needed to provide a large amount of meat, and there was no need to provide magic potions for him to grow. Of course, one meal would eat about 1 orders of chivalry's rations for a month. His Majesty actually caught Nimia and tamed it as the guardian beast of the Fire King's city. This is really incredible. When Duke Piero came to the Fire King's city to choose his own ducal residence, he saw this familiar subdragon and was filled with endless emotions. Back then, he gathered a huge amount of manpower and materials to cooperate with grey-mouthed Iron Dragon Orn to capture Nimia. However, he repeatedly returned empty-handed, wasting resources for nothing. In the end, he told Liszt about the giant lion Nimia as part of the deal. He had a malicious thought in his heart. He hoped that Liszt would also be part of the operation, wasting resources for nothing. It would be best if he ended up in a sorry state. In the end, comparisons were odious. He couldn't even seriously injure Nimia, but Liszt could tame Nimia. Maybe this is why I became a duke who lost my dukedom, while Liszt became a rising legend in the legendary continent. There is a huge gap between us. For the first time, Piero's confidence in restoring the Grey Iron Dukedom was greatly shaken. Liszt didn't know what Piero was thinking. At his current position, he didn't need to care about what others thought. He said calmly, "The great lion Nimia is only a sky dragon. Lowering its head and submitting to me is its smart choice. Otherwise, the so-called unkillable legend would have been shattered. It's quite a pity. Originally, I planned to use the lion's skin to customize a batch of standard leather armor for the Burning Legion." Piero opened his mouth but did not reply. October 157 of the Sapphire Calendar. The Burning Legion, who didn't wear the standard leather armor of the lion's skin, also disguised as the Sapphire Orders of Chivalry and participated in the annual Expansion Order War. The Eagle Kingdom still pursued the strategy of not resisting and let the flies of Sapphire plunder everywhere. However, when the 2-month war ended and the harvest was counted, Liszt was very dissatisfied. The low-level knight and serf population had a lot of harvest, but the resources of the nobles and elves were very little. Adonis has learned to be smart. He moved the big and small nobles in the hinterland of the coastal area to the inland area in advance and redivided the fiefs. This is like a lizard cutting off its tail and giving up the fertile coastal area. To be able to be so decisive, it seems that I have to look up to him. It took great courage to formulate such a humiliating strategy. No matter what strategic intention Adonis Moonlight Silver had, he had lost the noble quality of fearlessness as a knight. This also meant that he had lost the people's heart. The low-level knight who were forced to migrate under the Expansion Order War had basically understood that they had been abandoned, so they happily joined the Fire Kingdom without the slightest resistance. They were even glad that they could catch such an opportunity to become a member of the Fire Kingdom. This year's Expansion Order War was indeed a good opportunity. This was probably the last Expansion Order War carried out in the name of the Sapphire Duchy, and also the last opportunity for the captured knight to become a member of the kingdom. Because Liszt had already notified the 3 kingdoms and many duchies in the northeast corner of the legendary continent in advance. The Fire Kingdom would be officially founded on January 1st, 158 of the Sapphire Calendar, and the Flame Calendar would be launched, setting this day as the first month of the first year of the Flame Calendar. On this day of 3 months, he would be officially crowned as the king. The era of the Fire Kingdom was coming. Is this day finally coming? Anthony Sapphire stood on the highest corridor of the Blue Sky Mountain Palace, overlooking the entire Blue Dragon City in the distance. His mother, Sarit Greatflower Whalen, stood beside him and said with a faint smile, "Anthony, don't have any conflicting emotions. This day was decided when your father was still alive. There is nothing bad about becoming a vassal of the Fire Kingdom. The Iron and Steel Ridge royal family will respect our choice. I don't care about the Iron and Steel Ridge royal family's attitude. Compared to the talented and bold Liszt, Osborne has wasted more than 30 years and still hasn't ridden a platinum dragon. He's just a person with great ambition but little talent. Anthony shook his head. But great ambition but little talent is easy to communicate with. Great talent and bold strategy are dangerous. You want to talk about the Grey Iron Duchy? Yes, mother. A duchy that is older than our Sapphire Duchy disappeared just like that. I can't help but be vigilant. But this doesn't prove that List is dangerous. It only shows the greed of the Eagle royal family. Adonis is a short-sighted and incompetent person. List could have chosen not to treat the Sapphire Dragon, but he didn't do so. Adonis can't compare to this breadth of mind. Anthony nodded. Yes, a knight who can establish the foundation of a kingdom is a great knight. If you can think this way, the future of the Sapphire Duchy will be very smooth. How to handle the relationship with the Fire Kingdom will be the most important decision for our family in the future. Of course I can understand. Now, I'm very curious about the attitude of the three kingdoms towards the Fire Kingdom. Although this world is very vast, most of the resources have not been developed, and there are countless fertile lands hidden in the primeval forests. No one will give up their own interests. Anthony looked up at the sky and continued, List is nibbling away at the Eagle Kingdom. With every bite, the Fire Kingdom will grow a bit stronger. Maybe one day, I can witness the birth of an empire. Chapter 1064. Platinum Tooth Palace. After Osborne Platinum met the emissary group from the Fire Kingdom, he summoned several high-ranking ministers of the kingdom to discuss. What kind of etiquette do you think our country should use to deal with the establishment of the Fire Kingdom? Your Majesty, our country has a good relationship with the Fire Kingdom. We should treat it with higher standards to stabilize the friendship between the two countries. After all, our two countries are discussing the partition of the Eagle Kingdom. Both sides should treat this matter with greater sincerity, said a minister. I don't think it's necessary to raise the standards. This will make List think he has the initiative. The two countries should divide the Eagle Kingdom, and our country should be the leader, not the young Fire Kingdom. Although the Fire Kingdom is young, List is not a mediocre person. I'm afraid we still need to rely on him in the battle of dragon slaying. It's not too much to give him a higher standard. Normal etiquette is enough. Maybe we can give some compensation in the marriage between the Rose and White family and the Fire family. The ministers expressed their opinions, but Osborne frowned. Let's not mention the marriage for the time being. Your Majesty, why? Everyone present was Osborne's confidant, so there was nothing to keep secret. He said faintly, maybe the Rose and White family is too confident, and there are some unpredictable changes in the marriage. Maybe List doesn't want the marriage. No? How is it possible? The steel pearl of the Rose and White family is the first beauty in the north. She is the most suitable marriage partner for the royal family in the three kingdoms. How can List be willing to give up such a good marriage if he wants to join the dragon-raising family? You think it's good, maybe the other party doesn't think it's good. Osborne squinted and said, if you have a siren magic shooter and a female dragon knight by your side, maybe you will consider what you should choose. This List is really enviable. Magic shooter and dragon knight were unattainable symbols, and now there were sirens and women as prefixes, which was even more noble and incredible. Osborne joked that it was enviable, but in fact, he was really jealous to the point that he couldn't suppress it. The Siren High Mage and the female Dragon Knight also had a fatal attraction to him. Unfortunately, these noble women were all around List. If he was given a chance, he would immediately give up his current queen and choose one of them to be the new queen. Anyway, he already had a son, so the reproductive isolation between sirens and humans was no longer a problem. It was the same for the female Dragon Knight. However, he could only shout in his heart, why? Why is all the glory gathered in List's hands? Why am I, who was bathed in power and born of nobility, not the chosen son of glory? Why is it that the second son of a small noble from a remote countryside, a sapphire fly whose bloodline is less than 1/10,000th of mine, can become a king of a country on equal footing with me? Why isn't the fire dragon mine? The invisible dragon isn't mine. The mountain bronze dragon isn't mine. The bone dragon isn't mine. The unicorn isn't mine. Why isn't the siren high mage or the dragon knight mine? They shouted again and again. Unfortunately, when he returned to reality, he had to abandon these feelings. He had to be a qualified king who prioritized his own interests. You all have your own opinions, so I will make the final decision. This time, the celebration of the establishment of the Fire Kingdom will be prepared according to the standard of normal etiquette. At the same time, let the Red and White Rose family raise the standard. Osborne sent a letter, asking us to continue to increase our efforts to win over List. Mashu, Marilyn, how many gifts do you think we should bring to the Fire Kingdom this time? Grand Duchess Rose sat at the head of the table and asked while cutting the delicate swan liver. Mashu put down her knife and fork and showed a handsome smile. The Red and White Rose family never lacks gifts, but since Uncle Osborne is reluctant to spend his own money, we will send gifts in the name of the Red and White Rose family. In short, we can't let Osborne take advantage of us. The Grand Duchess said unhappily, don't talk about these things between relatives. Mashu, you have to become more mature. Mashu responded gently, Mother, although the Red and White Rose family and the Platinum family are close, we are not servants. We still have to show some attitude. Otherwise, if List sees such a situation, I am afraid he will look down on our family, which is not good for my sister. What is List's attitude? Has the marriage not been put on the agenda? Grand Duchess Rose raised her head and looked at Mashu. Mashu pondered a little. There is too much preparation to be done for the establishment of a country. This time, I will make a formal marriage invitation to List. At this time, Marilyn, who had been silent, suddenly said, Brother, I don't think you need to mention it. Oh, why? Maybe List doesn't have the idea of marriage. It's just our wishful thinking. Marilyn picked up a napkin and wiped the cream from the corner of her mouth. And I don't want my family to take the initiative to propose marriage. He needs to show sincerity, and now, I don't see any sincerity. Marilyn, I am good friends with List. This is sincerity. Maybe that's just you being self-righteous. I'm self-righteous? Mashu said with a smile and confidence, Marilyn, my dear sister, when the people of the Red and White Rose family come up with wealth, there will be no self-righteousness. You have to know that family, love, and friendship can really be bought with money. Maybe all this is just an illusion brought by money. No, this is the magic of money. Mashu refuted her sister. Seeing that her sister did not speak, she said more confidently, Father, Mother, Uncle Osborne sent a letter, then we will take out the red dragon water that should have been sold to the White and White Rose family and give it to List. Grand Duchess Rose chewed slowly and ate a piece of foie gras. She nodded and said, If you want to do it well. When your sister becomes the queen of the Fire Kingdom, everything will return to the hands of the Red and White Rose family with interest. Remember, we have a lot of money, but we don't do unprofitable business. List did not pay attention to how the various countries arranged the emissary groups. He was now too busy. Even after several years of preparation, when they were really ready to establish a country, they found that the thousands of things were actually not ready. After the aristocratic enfeoffment, Flame Island would inevitably fall into the huge pressure of population shortage. How to arrange the labor vacuum after the departure of the aristocrats was the biggest trouble. This was definitely not the only trouble. Your Majesty, this is the Development Committee's enfeoffment arrangement for the Earls and above. You can see if there is anything that needs to be modified or added. Gort took a list and hurried to the Palace of Sun, Moon, and Stars. List had officially moved into this magnificent palace, which stood on the top of the two mountains of the Sun and the Moon. The Development Committee had also moved from the Reed City administration to the Fire Kingdom administration, making this new big city the heart of Flame Island. Sit down first, let me have a look. List took the list and looked at it carefully. Chapter 1065. The list not only contained the information of every aristocrat, but also the detailed introduction of the kingdom's titles, the title regulations. List read it very carefully. The titles of the Fire Kingdom were officially named as 8 classes. The highest class was the king, the second class was the prince or grand duke, and the third class was the duke. These 3 classes belonged to the upper nobles. The king was inherited by the eldest son and was the only title. All the knight of the kingdom must follow the king unconditionally or conditionally and obey the king's orders. The prince and grand duke had the same title. The prince needed to have the royal bloodline, the Fire family's bloodline, and become a dragon knight. The Grand Duke had no bloodline restriction, but must ride a dragon that was not owned by the kingdom. In other words, the dragon knight trained by the royal family could not obtain the title of Grand Duke. In other words, without a dragon that completely belonged to one's own, one could not become a Grand Duke and establish a new country. The title of Duke was a bit more complicated. There were 3 main sources. The first source was that if the son of the Grand Duke failed to ride a dragon, he would be demoted to the title of Duke and continue to manage his own country. The second source was that the dragon knight trained by the royal family could obtain the title of Duke after making military exploits. The third source was that the domain knight repeatedly made military exploits and could also be promoted to the title of Duke. However, except for the son of the Grand Duke, as a dragon-raising family, any aptitude could inherit the title of Duke. As for the other 2 types of Duke titles, the son must become a domain knight in order to smoothly inherit it. In order to prevent the Duke from accidentally dying and the son's young and insufficient training, it was relaxed for 1 generation. In other words, the son of the Duke would still be a Duke, but if he could not become a domain knight, the grandson could only be a marquis. On the list, there was no prince, no Grand Duke. There were only 3 candidates for the title of Duke. Among them, Sapphire Duke Anthony Sapphire was just a name and was not included in the list of titles. There was no need for titles. Sapphire Duchy was an independent vassal state. The other 2. Lee William Tulip, Duke of Tulip Island, was the second largest island of the Fire Archipelago with an area of 450,000 square kilometers. Piero Grayiron, Duke of Parasol Island, was the 7th largest island of the Fire Archipelago with an area of 170,000 square kilometers. The Tulip family and the Grayiron family both had the Domain Knight Manual. As long as the descendants weren't too useless, it wouldn't be difficult for them to become a Domain Knight, and they could inherit the title of Duke. Father, promote Marquis Brubushy to the Duke of Mermaid City. His fief will be Mermaid City. List thought for a moment and added. According to the nobility conferring regulations of the kingdom, the title of nobility in a city can only go up to the rank of Marquis. The title of Duke of Mermaid City doesn't comply with the regulations, Lee Williams said. The title of nobility regulations was the system of nobility that List had previously reviewed and approved. Although he was often fickle and did whatever he wanted, it was not good for him to slap himself in the face too often. Therefore, after pondering for a moment, he said, then Brubushy will be the Duke of the Mermaid Territory. But the Mermaid Territory belongs to the Blazing Island. Didn't you say that the Blazing Island will not bestow nobles other than the Burning Legion? List hesitated for a moment before saying, the Mermaid Territory will be an exception and added to the title of nobility regulations. Anyway, it hasn't been officially published yet, so there's still room for amendments. From now on, the Mermaid Territory will be the sea around the Blazing Islands. After pausing for a moment, he continued, Brubushy will be the Marquis of the Saltwater Sea. As for the Saltwater Sea, there's no need to ask where it is. She can choose Mermaid City as her fief. Therefore, after talking for a long time, he still rejected the previous title of nobility regulations. Lee William was probably used to his second son's way of doing things, so he didn't mind that he wanted to amend the title of nobility regulations. Instead, he asked, if Brubushy is made a duke, do you want to bestow the other 6 mermaid marquises as well? No need. Blue Wuxia will stay in the Blazing Kingdom and manage Mermaid City seriously. The other 6 mermaids have already gone to travel around the world. How can they be bestowed the title of Duke if they don't do their proper work? They're still living in the ancient times and must understand that they can only obtain status and resources if they integrate into the Blazing Kingdom. The mermaids traveled around the sea for almost a year. Although they had the task of surveying and mapping the coastline of the legendary continent, it was obvious that they were having too much fun outside and had only completed a little of the surveying and mapping of the coastline. List was very dissatisfied with this. He had already urged them a few times, but they weren't able to change their minds. Therefore, he was rather resentful and only bestowed the mermaid, Blue Wuxia. The 4th rank of the Blazing Kingdom was the Marquis, and the 5th rank was the Earl. These 2 ranks belonged to the middle nobles. Actually, List had originally planned to divide the dukes into high-class dukes and low-class dukes. High-class dukes were dukes with a country and were classified as upper nobles. Low-class dukes were dukes without a country and were classified as middle-class nobles. This way, he would be able to gather 3 ranks of nobility, a total of 9 ranks of nobility. But in the end, he didn't do this. Instead of dividing them into high-class and low-class dukes, it was better to create a new title. And he had another idea, to deliberately dilute the status of vassal states to reflect the authority of the king. After all, the king of a duchy was a duke. Most feudal lords also had dukes. This meant that vassal states were just slightly larger fiefs. Even if you were a dragon-rearing family, you were just a follower of the king. Therefore, in the end, the middle nobles were only Marquis and Earl. The inheritance of these 2 ranks required one to reach the level of a Sky Knight, which could be extended for 1 generation. But if a Sky Knight wasn't born after 1 generation, the rank had to be lowered. In the list, the 1st rank Marquis was Jade City's Marquis, Emily Flame. As a light green sapphire dragon knight, List had asked Emily if she wanted to become a feudal noble. However, Emily decided to join the Burning Legion and hoped to follow List for life. Therefore, List gave her the surname Flame and made the Jade City near the dragon lair Jade Mountain where Ethan lived her fief. The 2nd rank Marquis was P Island's Marquis, D. Maria Rainstone. Her fief was half of P Island. The P Island was the 8th largest island in the Fire Archipelago, with an area of 150,000 square kilometers. However, other than D. Maria, P Island had not been given to any other nobles. As the earliest Marquis to rely on, List had already promised D. Maria that once the Rainstone family had accumulated enough battle achievements, he would be promoted to the Duke of P Island. The entire P Island would become the Rainstone family's fief. The 3rd rank Marquis was Gemstone Left Territories Marquis, Geoffrey Furonqui. His fief was half of Gemstone Island, which was the Gemstone Left Territory. Gemstone Island was the 6th largest island in the Fire Archipelago, with an area of 220,000 square kilometers. It was divided into 2 territories, the Gemstone Left Territory and the Gemstone Right Territory. Geoffrey was a perfect Sky Knight. He had been captured as a earl in the Eagle Kingdom and performed well after surrendering. The 4th rank Marquis was Adamantine City's Marquis, Yevich Water Peanut. His fief was the Fire Kingdom's gateway to the legendary continent, Adamantine City. Surprisingly, Yevich did not choose to become a feudal noble. Instead, he chose to join the Burning Legion and become a feudal noble. He was still pretending to be a great noble of the Eagle Kingdom and promoting internal strife in the Blizzard Mountain Duchy. The 5th rank Marquis was Fire City's Marquis, Paris Flame. Her fief was the Fire City. Like Emily, the light magic great swordsman, Paris, had become List's lover. She chose to become a feudal noble and was given the surname Flame by List. The 6th rank Marquis was Gem Right Territories Marquis, Dult Red Apricot. He was one of the nobles who had been captured by the Eagle Kingdom first to develop the Fire Island. At first, he was a earl. In recent years, he had made many contributions and was conferred the title of Marquis. The 7th rank Marquis was Thorn Upper Territories Marquis, Mendez Cabbage. His fief was 1/3 of Jingji Island, which was the Thorn Upper Territory. Mendez was a former Grey Iron Duchy's Marquis, and he was a perfect Sky Knight. However, he did not perform well after joining the Fire Kingdom. Jingji Island was the 4th largest island in the Fire Archipelago. It covered an area of 270,000 square kilometers and was divided into 3 territories, namely, Thorn Upper Territory, Thorn Left Territory, and Thorn Right Territory. The 8th rank Marquis was Dragon Valley City's Marquis, Nicole Bellows. His fief was the Dragon Valley City next to the Dragon Pit Giant Mine. The Bellows family was an Iron Knight family. In order to help List build the country, the Sapphire Grand Duke transferred the Bellows family to List. They had worked hard all these years and deserved the title of Marquis. The 9th rank Marquis was Thorn Left Territories Marquis, Amat Ice Shield. He was Yevich's father-in-law and a Marquis of Snow Wind Duchy who had secretly sided with List. For the time being, Amat was still a Marquis of Snow Wind Duchy and cooperated with Yevich to provoke the Elder Prince and the Second Prince. The 10th to 15th rank Marquis were all mermaids. Etnia, the Marquis of Great West, the Marquis of Fishermen, Gulvig, the Marquis of Water, Tibitas, the Marquis of the Trench, Sheriwala, the Fugitive Marquis, Viswendi, the Lost Marquis, Kokorich. Chapter 1066. The 16th rank Marquis was the Right Marquis of Thorns Forest, Elton Golden Chrysanthemum. List did not like this follower with poor aptitude and character. He had recruited him for the sake of buying a horse's bones. Thus, Elton was previously a Marquis, but he was still a low-ranking Marquis. The 17th rank Marquis was the Marquis of Reed City, Merry Dawn Daybreak. As the leader of the Blood Servants and a pure-blood vampire, Mary had always been deeply trusted by List. She was his eyes in the dark, spying on the intelligence of various countries. The Blood Servants' cultivation system had been improved by a Chi and the Association of Mages, abandoning some of the contents of the magic system and moving closer to the Knight system. Their fighting strength was further weakened, but their lurking ability was greatly improved. Thus, they were formally incorporated into the Burning Core by List and established the Blood Orders of Chivalry. Therefore, all the vampires were nobles of the city. The 18th rank Marquis was the Upper Kelp Marquis, Winston Fluorescent Grass. His fief was a quarter of the Kelp Island, which was also the Upper Kelp domain. He was one of the Marquis who had migrated from the Grey Iron Duchy. After joining the Fire Kingdom, his performance was average. The Kelp Island was the 3rd largest island of the Fire Kingdom, covering an area of 280,000 square kilometers. It was divided into 4 domains: Upper Kelp Domain, Lower Kelp Domain, Left Kelp Domain, and Right Kelp Domain. The 19th rank Marquis was the Lower Kelp Domain Marquis, Johnson Fujimoon. He was also a Marquis who had migrated from the Grey Iron Duchy, and his performance was also average. The 20th rank Marquis was the Left Kelp Domain Marquis, Hilton Basil. His son had married List's sister, Ulvera. Thus, he had migrated from the Sapphire Duchy to the Fire Kingdom very early on. Relying on his kinship and outstanding military exploits, he had become the last of the 20 founding Marquis of the Fire Kingdom. After looking at the list of Marquis, List basically approved of this arrangement. But after thinking about it, he quickly added, "Father, 20 founding Marquis is too few. Add another one to make a total of 21. Let Sassamit Saint join us. I will confer him the title of Marquis of the Right Kelp Domain. This is my special reward for him." Sassamit Saint was Listener Su of the Killing Moon Holy Tribe. List descended from the sky on his dragon, killed the old Listener, and supported him to take the throne. He showed his excellent character as a traitor of the Moonslayers. He was loyal to List to incorporate the native tribes of the Moonslayers, even resorting to all kinds of violent and bloody methods. When Liszt asked the ancient sorcerers to join the knight system, he immediately changed his surname to Saint, which meant that he was a follower of a saint. In other words, he was a follower of Liszt. Such a lackey naturally deserved to be rewarded. Lee William frowned. Liszt, Sassamit is a life count. As a noble who is not a knight, according to the title of nobility regulations, he can only be given a life title, and not a hereditary title. Moreover, life nobles can only be conferred up to the rank of earl. I know, father, but I want to make an exception for Sassamit. Liszt wasn't ashamed of being indecisive. On the contrary, he said with a hint of pride, I hope to use this method to remind the nobles of the kingdom that the Fire Kingdom is different from the other three kingdoms. Here, my authority is above any system. He glanced at Liszt. Lee William replied, I'm afraid that this will make most of the nobles dislike you, which will damage your authority. After all, the knight system has existed for thousands of years. Liszt smiled faintly. Father, you don't have to worry. My lifespan has already exceeded the limit of a normal person. I am destined to rule the Fire Kingdom for a long time. Slowly, the nobles will get used to it, and learn to use the new knight system I created to measure their lives. You found the training method of the Dragon City Lord? Lee William couldn't help but think. Not the Dragon City Lord, but close. Liszt didn't want to say more, so Lee William didn't ask any more. Even though they were father and son, they belonged to different families. Some secrets shouldn't be touched. He changed the topic and said, since you have your considerations, I don't object to making Sassamit a marquis. I hope this move won't affect the boundaries between the nobles of feudal lands, feudal cities, and life nobles. Other than the 8 levels of nobility, there were 3 different types of nobility in the kingdom. The first type was a feudal title, in which the nobles had their own territory and enjoyed absolute control over it. They could also recruit their own followers and enfeoff them. The second type was a feudal title, in which the nobles had a city as their territory. The nobles had jurisdiction over the city, and they were under the jurisdiction of the Burning Legion. These 2 types of nobility were hereditary, and it was clear that the eldest son would inherit it. The third type was a life nobility. Life nobility did not have a territory, and it couldn't be hereditary. After death, the nobility would be taken back by the kingdom. Other than honorary life nobility, feudal lands, feudal cities, and nobility all had corresponding knight-level restrictions. A trainee knight could be made a lord at most, an earth knight could be made a baron at most, an elite earth knight could be made a viscount at most, a sky knight could be made a marquis at most, a domain knight could be made a duke at most. Furthermore, the Fire Kingdom changed the lowest level of nobility, Lord Knight, to Lord. Therefore, the 8 levels of nobility were, King, Prince/Grand Duke, Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, Baron, and Lord. There were a total of 64 earls on the list. There were actually even more earls and nobles. However, these nobles, because of their original affiliation, after consulting their opinions, continued to follow a few feudal dukes and marquis. For example, Deborah Rainflower continued to follow his uncle D. Maria. The number 1 of Liszt's direct earl followers was Stormwind City's Earl Marcus Wheel. His former home tutor ultimately chose to join the Burning Legion, and became the leader of the Burning Orders of Chivalry. His strength was only an elite Earth Knight, and he was promoted to Earl by Liszt. Stormwind City was located in the Royal Territory, and was a satellite of the Fire Kingdom. Number 2 was Longtail Island's Earl Roland Pine Cone. He was Liszt's uncle, and was also an elite Earth Knight, promoted to Earl by special permission. Number 3 was Spirit City's Earl Gort Mast. This former home tutor did not want to join the Burning Legion. Of course, even if he wanted to join Liszt, he would not be willing. No matter how high his title was, it could not hide that he was only a trainee knight. Many people secretly criticized his title behind his back. As for Spirit City, it was located not far from Realgar City, and belonged to the original Realgar territory. The administrative division of the Fire Kingdom was divided into 5 levels: territory, city, county, town, and village. It was basically a copy of China's provinces, cities, counties, towns, and villages. Cities were also divided into territory, city, and county cities according to their administrative divisions. Territory or territory cities were used to confer marquises, city or city cities were used to confer earls, and county cities were used to confer viscounts. At the level of town, there was no distinction between city or fief, and the title of earl was used to confer earl. Below that, there was only the title of earl and fief, no title. Marquesas territory, Stormwind City, was a city-cities, and Gort's territory, Spirit City, was a separate city. In addition, according to the size of the island, some islands automatically replace territory, city, and county as the title of earl. Roland's territory, Longtail Island, was an island the size of a city in the Shell Sea. In the Flame Archipelago, apart from the 5th largest island, Red Tree Island, and the 9th largest island, Anchor Island, which have yet to be conferred, the other large and small islands have already been conferred. In the future, when there are new aristocratic enfeoffments, we can only enfeoff to the open sea and the mainland. Lee William sighed with emotion. When he first found the Flame Archipelago, he thought that it was incomparably vast, even larger than the Sapphire Duchy. It was enough to establish a duchy here. However, Liszt directly established a kingdom, and the Flame Archipelago seemed too shabby. Thus, the first batch of aristocratic enfeoffments were basically all over the archipelago. Therefore, with Realgar City as the gateway, we will continue to expand to the mainland. Nibbling away at the Eagle Kingdom is the best choice. Liszt put down the list. He did not look at the list of 3 ranks of aristocratic enfeoffments: Viscount, Baron, and Lordship. Just by looking at the number of aristocratic enfeoffments, he found that there were about 366 viscounts, 1,240 barons, and over 10,000 lords. Counting 3 dukes, 21 marquises, and 64 earls, this was the entire aristocratic population of the Fire Kingdom. They all had the same honor, the founding aristocratic population. Father, we will hold the founding ceremony according to this list. Liszt stood up and walked out of the palace side by side with Lee William. In addition, the fiefs can be adjusted appropriately. Young, powerful, but low-ranking aristocrats should be enfeoffed to the mainland as much as possible, so that they can continue to forge ahead and expand their territory. After the chaos of the founding period, a new war will soon be launched. The war he was talking about was no longer a small-scale war like the order to expand. Instead, it was a formal declaration of war against the Eagle Kingdom in alliance with the Steel Ridge Kingdom. It feels too rushed. Liszt, perhaps we should slow down. Chapter 1067. The issue of enfeoffment was the first big problem in establishing the Fire Kingdom. However, with the Development Committee handling it, Liszt didn't have much to worry about. He only needed to confirm the titles of Duke, Marquis and Earl. Viscount, Baron and Lord were all conferred by the Development Committee based on military achievements. Now, there was another problem in front of Liszt, which was to form a cabinet and an outer cabinet. The knight system in this world was a feudal serfdom system. Any noble lord was a feudal slave owner. Apart from paying taxes to the superior lord, all other powers were in the hands of the lord, such as justice, finance, military, trade, agriculture and so on. Of course, the justice of the territory was still subject to the kingdom's laws. Thus, if Liszt wanted to govern the Fire Kingdom, he had to consider the governance of Flame Island and other undivided lands, as well as effectively constrain the various levels of lords in the kingdom. This involved the system of cabinet officials on the Blazing Island and the system of external cabinet officials of the Blazing Kingdom. In other kingdoms, the king would usually convene the lords to discuss the kingdom's affairs. At the same time, the nobles would have to enter the palace to take up positions and manage the royal family for the king. However, when it came to Liszt, he planned to strengthen the centralization of power, so he divided the officials into the cabinet and the outer cabinet. The outer cabinet was easy to deal with. The development committee could just patch it up and form an outer cabinet. Thus, when it was close to the new year, he issued dozens of appointment documents in the name of the Fire Kingdom, announcing them to the entire kingdom. Duke Li William Tulip was appointed as the Prime Minister of the Outer Cabinet. Marquise Emily Flame was appointed as the First Defense Minister, Earl Marcus Will was appointed as the Second Defense Minister, and Marquise Sassamet Saint was appointed as the Third Defense Minister. The First Defense Minister was the head of the department, while the Second and Third Defense Ministers were his assistants. Marquise de Maria Rain Stone was appointed as the First Foreign Affairs Minister, and Marquis Yevich Peanut was appointed as the Second Foreign Affairs Minister. Marquis Geoffrey Furonque was appointed as the First Internal Affairs Minister, and Marquis Duroot Red Apricot was appointed as the Second Internal Affairs Minister. Marquis Paris Flame was appointed as the First Finance Minister, and Gort Mast Earl was appointed as the Second Finance Minister. Duke Piero Grey Iron was appointed as the First Justice Minister. Crazy Truth was appointed as the First Minister of Arcane Magic, while Kenley Truth was appointed as the Second Minister of Arcane Magic. Marquis Blubos was appointed as the First Minister of the Sea. He also appointed other marquises and earls as Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Trade, Minister of Education, Minister of Craftsmen, Minister of Health, Minister of Communications, etc. The appointment to the outer pavilion did not cause too much of a stir. In fact, many nobles were not willing to become ministers of the outer pavilion. Now that the country had been established and the nobles had all become feudal lords, they wanted to build their own territories. At most, they would listen to the king's orders during times of war. However, the outer pavilion was an order from Liszt, and the nobles who served as ministers had to take time out to exercise their duties and power. Compared to the outer pavilion's announcement to the entire nation, the establishment of the cabinet was very low-key. The reason was very simple. Liszt did not want the feudal lords to participate in his management of the Blazing Island. He directly selected full-time administrators from the various academies, as well as a suitable knight from the Burning Legion to form a cabinet under his control. At the same time that the outer pavilion and the cabinet were established, he also established the internal court of the Palace of Sun, Moon and Stars. To put it bluntly, they were full-time servants of the family. The old butler Carter served as the internal court's chief steward. Mrs. Morrison, who was excellent at brewing milk tea, served as the chief steward of the maids. Mrs. Abbey, who was getting fatter and fatter, served as the chief steward of the catering department. Thomas, who was originally a valet and later became the Thorn Castle's butler, served as the chief steward of the male servants. In addition, there were also the wine master, drama master, horse groom's master, etiquette master, and so on. Only a few of these officials were Liszt's old acquaintances in the Flower Town. The rest were mostly servants plundered from the Eagle Kingdom in recent years. The castles of aristocratic lords had a large number of servants. Skilled servants were more expensive than craftsmen in the serf market. At present, the Palace of Sun, Moon and Stars had more than 1,800 servants responsible for maintaining the operation of this huge palace. At present, only Liszt lived in the palace. Achi, Amelie, Paris, and the others did not often live in the castle. Madame Penelope also lived with Lee William. But even if he was alone, Liszt was not willing to let himself be wronged. He wanted the palaces of the other kingdoms to be as gorgeous as they were. This was not only for enjoyment, but also to reflect the glory of the Flame family. How could a king destined to go down in history not have a magnificent palace and a group of servants as a foil? Is this the Palace of Sun, Moon, and Stars? It is truly magnificent and unimaginably magnificent. Among the emissary group of a certain principality that came to participate in the founding celebration of the Flame Kingdom, the head of the emissary group stood in the corridor of the diplomatic hall of the Flame Kingdom, looking at the Palace of Sun, Moon, and stars in the distance and sighing in admiration. The emissary's deputy immediately followed up, "Sir, this is a palace that was built with the participation of arch-wizards. You see, these two mountains were forcibly joined together by powerful magic power to become what they are today." Another deputy also followed up, "It is said that there are still many wonders that have yet to be built. The Flame Kingdom now has 2 arch-wizards. Any great building is very simple for them. Yes, the times are changing too quickly. A few years ago, who would have heard of a person like Liszt? However, the current Liszt is a great legend that no one dares to ignore in the northeast of the legendary continent." The head of the emissary group clicked his tongue. After all, the Flame Kingdom is the publicly acknowledged Son of Glory. "Heh, if I can ride a dragon, I am willing to reduce my lifespan by 10 years. You are willing to reduce your lifespan by 10 years, I am willing to reduce my lifespan by 20 years. Hee, then wouldn't you die while riding a dragon? What do you mean by that? Do I look very old? I am only 30 years old this year." The two deputies immediately started arguing about the topic of reducing lifespan by riding a dragon. The head of the emissary group waited until they were about to turn red before saying, "All right, stop arguing. Don't let the flame people see you as a joke. The glory of the night can't take care of you. If you haven't even touched a dragon before, then don't even think about riding a dragon. You should place your sights on World of Warcraft. Look at this Flame Kingdom, how many night-riding birds." Following the direction of his finger, many night-riding large birds could be seen flying in the sky above the Flame Kingdom. Some of them were the guards patrolling the kingdom, the Orders of Chivalry Linnet team. Some of them were the noble lords who had arrived at the kingdom to prepare for the conferring ceremony. With the beast-taming contract, there were more and more night-riding flying birds in the Flame Kingdom. However, not all night could get the beast-taming contract. They had to contribute to the kingdom and sign a confidentiality agreement before they could get the beast-taming contract. Of course, no matter how strict the confidentiality measures were, it was impossible to keep it a secret. The biggest advantage of the Flame Kingdom was Liszt's Awe of the Phoenix ability. He could drive away the birds in World of Warcraft and quickly form a beast-taming contract with a knight. Otherwise, the wild World of Warcraft would rarely accept taming from humans, let alone recognize a knight and form a beast-taming contract. Just as the 3 emissaries were pointing at the Flame Kingdom, suddenly, a huge figure leaped out from the horizon. The silhouette got closer and closer. Under the terrified gazes of the 3, the gigantic silhouette slowly approached the Inferno Kingdom. It was a majestic, gigantic lion. Thick fur, sharp eyes, full of vigor, scanning the entire Fire King city. That's the giant lion Nimia. Previously, the Fire Kingdom's receptionist reminded us that the Fire Kingdom has a giant lion Nimia as a guardian beast. Heavens, is giant lion Nimia that big? Unicorn, giant lion Nimia, and Phoenix, fire dragon bird. Oh right, there's also that giant lightning dragon turtle. Not only is His Majesty the King of the Fire Kingdom adept at riding dragons, he's also extremely attractive to sky dragons. The leader of the emissaries was filled with admiration. He paused for a moment. He then added, "Glory to the knight, it is my honor to be able to live in the same era as such a great knight, and to have an audience with His Majesty Liszt." Chapter 1068. Although the Fire Kingdom is located in the sea outside of the legendary continent, I can't help but feel worried after witnessing the development here. The emissary group of the Eagle Kingdom was still Alexander White Iron. At this moment, he had already checked into the Hall of the Fire Kingdom. After following the receptionist and visiting the Fire Kingdom and the Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace, he couldn't help but look worried. "Yes, sir, the Fire Kingdom is too. The deputy wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the right words to describe what he had seen. The pressure was immense, but he understood what the deputy wanted to express. The Taiyue Kingdom. Yes, sir, this is the feeling. It's like walking in the legendary Moon Empire. Tall stone buildings, wide and clean streets, neatly organized shops and houses, constantly patrolling teams, and strange Mercedes-Benz cars. This is probably what the real Moon Empire looks like. After the deputy praised, he said sourly, "It's really different to have a magic shooter. The light of civilization brought by magic has allowed the Fire Kingdom to enjoy such beauty." Alexander sighed. Moon Mountain, Sun Mountain. King List's ambition is probably greater than we thought. It's hard to look up to him. What does these two mountains have to do with King List's ambition? Moon Mountain is the Moon Empire, Sun Mountain is the Sun Empire, and his palace is the Sun, Moon, and Stars Palace. Doesn't this mean that he inherited all the glory of the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire? Sun Empire? The deputy was confused. It's also an ancient magic civilization. It's as great as the Moon Empire, but it's not in the legendary continent. It's on the other side of the Devil's Sea. After the collapse of the magic civilization, it was no longer able to reach the other side of the Devil's Sea. Alexander was a noble born in the royal family, so he knew a lot. In fact, the legend of the Sun Empire wasn't a secret. It was just that information was limited. Most commoners and nobles had never heard of it. So, when Liszt first learned about the Sun's Child, he thought that he had discovered an incredible new continent. History wasn't recorded, but this was a magical fantasy world. The dragon-raising family had a long history, so they naturally knew many secrets passed down from ancient times. Then, sir, did King Liszt really inherit the Sun Empire? Who knows? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Alexander didn't say much. He knew that the so-called inheritance was nonsense. There was no relationship between the ancient magic civilization and the knight civilization at all. This was just the dragon-rearing family trying to make themselves look good. However, deceiving commoners and lesser nobles was not a bad idea. This would make commoners revere nobles, and lesser nobles revere the greater nobles. From his point of view, Liszt was also trying to flatter himself, shamelessly flattering both the Moon Empire and the Sun Empire. However, he felt that it was only natural for Liszt to say such things. The reason was simple. The Fire Kingdom had two magic shooters. Whoever had a magic shooter could rightfully claim that they had inherited the ancient magic civilization. It was now the era of the shrinking magic net, and it was very difficult for high mages to advance. Without the favor of magic, without the care of the truth, it was impossible for a high mage to be born. So Alexander quickly changed the topic. Many mages from the three kingdoms are moving to the Fire Kingdom. This has become the holy land of magic. And he is the son of glory, the person most favored by the glory of the night. Dragons and sub-dragons revolve around him. This is not a good thing for our Eagle Kingdom. Yes, King Liszt is secretly supporting the expansion order of the Sapphire Fly. Unfortunately, the two victories in the dragon-slaying war made it difficult for our kingdom to resist. The deputy shook his head. Speaking of the expansion order, Alexander fell into silence. This was the shame of the Eagle Kingdom that lasted for hundreds of years. He thought that after Adonis inherited the throne, he would put Alonso Celeste in an important position, which would solve the hidden danger of the Sapphire Fly once and for all. He didn't expect that it would reflect the rise of Liszt. After a while, he adjusted his emotions and let out a sigh. Dragon Duo really does whatever he wants. Liszt, who was giving Alexander a lot of pressure, was in the palace of the Sun, Moon, and Stars, entertaining the Steel Ridge Kingdom's envoy group that had just arrived. The head of the envoy group, Mashu Rose White Rose, was his distinguished guest, and he personally accompanied Mashu to the banquet. Mashu, thank you for personally serving as the head of the envoy group and celebrating the founding ceremony of the Fire Kingdom for me. At the same time, thank you for the gift from the Rose White Rose family. This batch of red dragon water has helped me greatly. List sincerely thanked Mashu. He spent too much resources raising the dragon. The most scarce thing was the red dragon water. Your Majesty, List, you are the most distinguished friend of the Rose-White Rose family. If it weren't for my father's old age, he would have come to congratulate your Majesty in person. I have understood the intention of the Grand Duke of Rose, Mashu. Let's get drunk tonight. Of course. After the toast, the atmosphere of the banquet became more and more lively. At this time, Mashu mentioned the marriage. She hinted that her sister was already an adult, and she was always looking forward to meeting List. However, List had no intention of marrying Marilyn Red-White Rose as his queen, so he laughed it off, indicating that he had been too busy recently and couldn't be distracted. This was already hinting that he would not marry Marilyn without hurting his reputation. He still had a good impression of the generous Rose-White Rose family who liked to throw money at people. It was a pity that Mashu did not seem to understand or believe the excuse that List found. In the early days of the founding of the country, he was really busy. He thought that after this busy period, maybe List should think about marriage. So the banquet continued to laugh, and the drunk Mashu was helped to rest by the servants. List, who had used his combat power to digest the wine, took a bath. In the steamy bathroom, the crystal lamp exuded a soft light. He couldn't help but rub his head. Mashu, honest man. I gave such an obvious hint, and she didn't respond. It seems that after the founding ceremony, I have to write a letter to make clear my attitude. I can't delay Marilyn's life for a little red dragon water. Although he was already a qualified noble and considered everything from the perspective of benefits, deep in his heart, he still had a simple kindness. No matter what the politics or interests were, they shouldn't have affected an ignorant girl. He made a decision in his heart. He couldn't help but smile. I'm really a good person. Please remember this book's domain name. Jiutian Shenhuang mobile version website. Chapter 1069. Your Majesty, this is the Frac Abier designed with reference to the Eagle King, the Steel Ridge King, and the Blast Furnace King. Is there anything else you need to modify? The best tailor in the Fire Kingdom was the inner court gown officer Morris. He led his assistant to hold a set of luxurious clothing and stood in front of List, asking respectfully. The laugh-pleated collar is too big. Remove it for me. Don't embroider such an obvious flame emblem on the chest. Just blend the flame into the fabric in the form of a pattern. And the images of these dragons, be abstract. Don't make it too high profile. I don't like it. The dragon pattern is easy to deal with. But Your Majesty, the huge laugh-pleated collar is the king's authority, don't question. Learn to listen. Mosley, go and modify it. List waved his hand lightly. He didn't need the pleated collar to show his authority. He had a huge dissatisfaction with the clothing here since a long time ago, especially the pleated collar. It could suffocate people to death in the summer. Now that he had become the king, it was time to reform the strange aristocratic clothing and replace the bloated frac abier with simple, fitting clothes. But there was no need to reform too much at once. It would be too unconventional and nondescript. He planned to use a year to slowly change the aristocratic clothing of the Fire Kingdom to suits, tuxedos, and equestrian attire on Earth. Suits could be worn in daily life, tuxedos could be worn on formal occasions, and equestrian attire was for riding. Of course. The colors of suits, tuxedos, and equestrian attire on Earth were relatively monotonous. This was not what List liked. Although he advocated simple clothes, he had a pursuit for color. He would stipulate that the king's clothing could use gold and red. Other aristocrats could use colors other than gold and red. Only a variety of colors was stylish enough. Just as he sent gown officer Morris away, a servant came to report that Gort wanted to see him. Let him in. A moment later. Gort walked into the Palace of Stars. After seeing Liszt, he gave a slightly exaggerated salute. "Your Majesty, your most loyal follower, Gort Mast, offers you the most sincere greetings." "Alright, Gort, you don't have to say a bunch of hypocritical bootlicking every time." Gort chuckled. "Your Majesty, this is not hypocritical flattery. This is my sincere respect for you. It's just that I've been too excited recently. The Flame Kingdom is about to be established. This is a great kingdom. When I followed you in the Flower Town, I had only experienced such an incredible scene in my dreams. This means that you didn't think highly of me back then." Liszt sipped his milk tea and glanced at Gort. Gort immediately complained, "How could that be? It's just that your Majesty's glory is so strong that it has blinded my eyes. I, on the other hand, was a down-and-out countryside aristocrat. My horizons could not transcend the Coral Island. It was your Majesty who brought me from the Flower Town to the vast world." Stop with the flattery. What business do you have here?" Liszt went straight to the point. Occasionally listening to flattery was good for the body and mind, but listening to it too much was boring. Gort had been following Liszt for nearly 7 years since the Flower Town. He was very familiar with Liszt's style and therefore restrained his desire to continue flattering. Immediately after, he said sternly, "We have drawn up a procedure for the night procession from the Flame Kingdom's Gilded Avenue, through the Arc de Triomphe, all the way to the plaza of the Palaces of the Sun, Moon, and Stars, to be inspected by your Majesty. Marquis de Maria believes that he can accept your Majesty's conferment in the plaza, while Duke Piero believes that he should accept the conferment in the main hall. According to the procedure of the founding ceremony, the conferment ceremony would be followed by the night procession." Now, there was a disagreement. De Maria felt that the conferment in the plaza would be the center of attention. Piero felt that the conferment in the main hall was in line with the noble etiquette of aristocrats. "What about my father's opinion?" "Sir Marquis has no opinion. Therefore, the outer pavilion cannot make a decision for the time being and can only report to you," Gort replied. Since the conferment ceremony had not yet been completed, the titles of aristocrats were still the same as before. Liszt pondered for a moment and then said, "After the night procession, the lords, baron, and viscounts will accept the conferment in the plaza, while the counts and marquises will accept the conferment in the main hall. The dukes will hold a separate conferment ceremony at a later date. The different conferment ceremonies for the upper, middle, and lower aristocrats were quite in line with their respective classes." Gort responded, "Then I will go back and prepare." "Sir Laird, are you sure you don't want to be the first arcane minister? Chrissy has already declined to me several times. She believes that you are closer to the truth and have served as the chief magic consultant of the noble Frost Empire for many years. The position of first arcane minister is more suitable for you." In the morning, he was still preparing for the founding ceremony in the Palaces of the Sun, Moon, and Stars. In the afternoon, Liszt had already arrived at the Reed City's Wizard Tower and met High Wizard Laird Truth. He tried to persuade Laird to become the first arcane minister. Laird straightforwardly refused. "No, your Majesty, Liszt, this kind of official position is not what I am after. I stayed in the Fire Kingdom to pursue the truth, not to be caught up in mundane affairs. Also, when it comes to being closer to the truth, Achilles is the one who is closest to it. I am already very satisfied that I can cooperate and do some research." Achi could not become the first arcane minister. She was not human and did not have much of a sense of identity with most humans. She only acknowledged Liszt. What she liked was to do research and explore the truth. Seeing Laird's firm attitude, Liszt no longer tried to persuade him. In his heart, he also did not want Laird to become the first arcane minister. He trusted Chrissy more, and Chrissy had been constantly cooperating with him to complete the reform of the Magi system, allowing the Arcanist system to replace the Magi system. When he walked into the laboratory, he saw Achi operating a magic microscope. Liszt stood to the side, motioning for the grown-up Lucy and Ruth not to come over to greet him, and to focus on helping Achi with the experiment. After waiting for a while, Achi left the eyepiece of the magic microscope. When she saw List, she immediately revealed a sweet smile. "Brother, you're here." "Yes, what experiment are you doing?" "Observation of the sun's child bloodline. Using the magic microscope, we can get detailed information about the druid transformation." Achi turned around and said to the twins, "Lucy, bring over the experiment records for this period of time. Ruth, clean the magic microscope and prepare a new observation sample." "Yes, teacher." Although the twins were not adults yet, their bodies had already grown up, and they already had a faint feminine taste. Their appearance was getting better and better. Of course, compared to Achi, there was still a huge gap. But this did not prevent List from looking at the twins with an appreciative gaze. The charm of a young girl who had just matured was unique. It was a pleasure to endure. Lucy was now proficient in fire magic, and Ruth was proficient in water magic. They had already begun to show that they were highly valued by the smoke mission. According to Achi's observation, both of them could become archmages before they reached adulthood. If some means were taken to promote their growth, it was not impossible to look forward to becoming archmages. "Teacher, the experiment records you wanted." Lucy quickly brought over a few notes. Achi took the notes and handed one to List. "Brother, take a look at this first. This is Achi's summary of the information on the stronghold. After reading it, brother should have a comprehensive understanding of how to reach the stronghold. Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heavens God Emperor." Chapter 1070. The laboratory was very quiet. After handing the notes to List, Achi told List a few points to pay attention to, and then she continued to do experiments with Lucy and Ruth. Time passed. For List, this summary note written by Achi herself was the most obscure book he had read in recent years. However, he read it more seriously than ever. Not only did he read it word by word, but he also flipped back from time to time. There was not much content in the notes, only about 30,000 words long, but he read it for 3 hours. It was not until the sky outside the window darkened that he suddenly closed the notebook and gently exhaled. He closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. He quietly pondered the contents of the notes. The contents were Achi's summary of all the research related to barriers in the past 2 years. She analyzed the basis for the existence of barriers from the 3 levels of magic power, matter, and spirit. She also described the existence of barriers in an abstract way and proposed the possibility of touching the barrier. "Starting with magic power is the most likely way for me to touch the barrier at the moment. I swallowed the phoenix incarnation and have supreme magical fire attribute chi. Leo also has supreme magical fire attribute magic power. Leo and I are training as Dragon Knight, which is the easiest way to break the magic barrier." Barrier was a very abstract concept. However, it was not difficult to understand. List's summary of Achi's notes could be likened to a deeper understanding of breaking the inherent concept. For example, the ancients might think that matter was composed of tiny particles. Then, modern scientists relied on microscopy and other means to get the concept of molecules, believing that molecules were the smallest matter. Then, scientists discovered the concept of atoms, believing that atoms were the smallest matter. Molecules and atoms were barriers for the scientists of that era. However, modern scientists discovered the concept of quarks, believing that quarks were the smallest matter. So scientists broke the atomic barrier, and quarks became the new barrier. List thought for a moment in his mind, then sighed slightly. So the magic barrier is the essence of the formation of magic power. Achi asked me to start from this aspect to trace the formation of magic power. But what do I have to do to trace the formation of magic power? What kind of training method does Dragon Knight use to trace the formation of magic power? After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure it out. He stood up and said, "Achi, I'm going out for a walk. I still need time to digest some of the content." You don't have to rush, big brother. There's still a lot of time." In turn, Achi comforted List not to worry. In the past, it was List who told her not to be a workaholic. After leaving the Infernal Mage Tower, List rode on the formless dragon bard, tore through space, and arrived at the endless volcanoes. He then summoned Leo from one of the volcanoes. A man and a dragon leisurely soared in the sky. List shared the information he had obtained about the stronghold with Leo. A dragon's IQ was not lower than a human's, and Leo also hoped to improve himself and become a stronger dragon. Therefore, he was very cooperative with List when it came to cultivating in the stronghold. "List, most of my dragon supreme magic comes from volcanoes, and the magic power of volcanoes comes from endless flames and magma. Could the stronghold be in the volcanoes? The stronghold is not a fixed object. It is a state, a cognition, a nature. But what you said reminded me, where did the volcano supreme magic come from? Perhaps it can be seen as the existence of the stronghold. No, in the triangle theory, matter and spirit can become magic power at any time. The volcano supreme magic might be transformed from magma and other substances, so it doesn't involve the stronghold. Perhaps your thoughts are shackled. I am the flame, and the flame is me. You said that fire dragons are born from volcanoes and will turn into volcanoes after death. Then, volcanoes give birth to me and raise me. Why can't the stronghold of fire magic power be in the volcanoes?" Leo asked. "The stronghold has nothing to do with your birth. There have been so many dragons in history, but it seems that only the Weave Dragon broke the stronghold. I want to be the first fire dragon to break the stronghold. I hope so too. Then let's go to the volcanoes." Their minds were connected as one, and the questions they were thinking about were actually the same as the questions they were thinking about. Thus, the few thoughts that flashed through their minds were directly expressed as a man and a dragon flying out of the clouds, rushing towards the mouth of a volcano that was emitting smoke. "List, if we bathe in the volcano for 10 days to half a month, we might be able to touch the stronghold of fire magic power. Stop fooling around. The Fire Kingdom's founding ceremony is coming up soon. I need to rush back as soon as possible. What's so important about a human kingdom? Without a kingdom, where would we get fire dragon potions for you to drink? Just leave it to those ants to work for us. You are the king, and I am the dragon. We just need to enjoy everything. Whoever dares to refuse to provide for us will be destroyed." Although Leo was suppressed by List's soul imprint, he still could not hide the fact that he was an evil dragon. "I'll accompany you down there for a spin, and then I need to go back immediately. This is not negotiable. But you can bathe in the lava and slowly search for the stronghold of fire magic power." "Of course I will." The man and the dragon in the form of magic power merged into the lava of the volcano. Volcano supreme demons were being produced here at all times, but the rate of production was very slow and could not keep up with Leo's absorption speed. But this time, Leo did not absorb the small amount of volcano supreme demons. Instead, he carefully observed the birth of the volcano supreme demons. List was also carefully observing. Ever since he swallowed the phoenix and obtained the phoenix incarnation, he could freely swim in the lava and flames. He had not really carefully experienced the lava. Every time he entered and left the lava, he was in a hurry. He did not like the lava environment very much. This was not like soaking in a hot spring. The feeling of entering the lava and losing all 5 senses and relying solely on magic power was no different from claustrophobia for humans. But when he calmed down and observed, he gradually found that the lava was very interesting. I didn't feel any decrease in the magma, but the volcano superdemon appeared just like that. Is it because the amount of magma changed too little when the magma changed into magic power, or is the volcano superdemon not made from magma? He focused his attention and thought about the difference. Relying on the existence of magic eyes, he had a clear understanding of the transformation between matter and magic power. Especially when he used the dragon eye orbit while riding on Leo, he could clearly see that even a piece of mud could be decomposed into earth magic power under special circumstances. And how earth magic power formed stones and mud was also vivid in his mind. Fire magic power, sea water magic power, breeze, wind magic power, ice magic power, lightning, thunder magic power, all of them were constantly transforming. Only light magic power and dark magic power rarely transformed into matter. It was more like a special inactive magic power state. Lava, flames. Volcano supreme demons. Vaguely, Liszt felt that he had grasped an important inspiration. Chapter 1071. Creating something out of nothing. This sentence appeared in Liszt's mind. This was one of the 36 stratagems. If you insisted that you had something that didn't exist, it would be the same as making something up. It was also an inspiration that he suddenly thought of. The so-called magic barrier might be creating something out of nothing. And this, creating something out of nothing, wasn't creating without any basis, but creating from nothing. In the triangle theory, magic power could be transformed from matter and spirit, which all belong to the category of creating something out of something. Therefore, ordinary fire and fire-type magic power belong to this category, which only high school students could have. Therefore, there was no information about barriers. However, the relationship between volcano and magma was creating something out of nothing, which made him think that volcano was a product of creating barriers. The source of volcano is nothing, but the formation of this nothing requires harsh conditions. In my opinion, the high-temperature environment and the dense fire-type magic power of the magma are good breeding grounds for the formation of a nothing. And this nothing is more like the essence of the world. It was difficult to explain Liszt's current inspiration with words. For example, there should be applause here. The environment represented by this nothing was as it should be. Where there should be super magic, there should be super magic. The magic barrier was such an abstract concept. So, in order to touch the barrier of fire magic power, I have to understand this nothing and do what should be. Now it seems that this is more like an idealistic view of the world. He sent a message to Leo saying, "Follow me." Then, he suddenly rushed out of the lava. He turned into a blazing phoenix and hovered above the crater of the volcano. Soon, Leo also rushed out of the magma and turned into a black and red evil fire dragon. Liszt, who had returned to his human body, landed on the dragon tooth platform and quickly completed the dragon night resonance and mind connection. Leo, I might have found the barrier. He shared his inspiration with Leo, and the two thoughts kept exploring and fusing. Soon, Leo let out a deafening roar. Roar. He was expressing his and Liszt's excitement. Touch the barrier and find as it should be. The man and the dragon felt that the path ahead of them had suddenly become clear. The thick fog that covered the path of the Dragon Knight's cultivation system quickly disappeared. The Supreme Demonic Dragon and the Supreme Demonic Dragon battle chi intertwined and circulated continuously. This was a human and a dragon trying to apply the idealistic worldview of how things should be to the materialistic reality. Liszt took the lead, and Leo assisted from the side. Liszt could understand the idealism and materialism better. He had received materialistic education on Earth and had formed a deeply rooted materialistic worldview. After transmigrating to this world, there was no religion or God shrouding it. Even though there were magical colors formed by magic, the main world was still dominated by materialism. But this did not mean that idealism was wrong. In fact, no one on Earth could prove that idealism was absolutely wrong. Idealism and materialism were just two different philosophies to understand the world. Liszt did not know much about philosophy. At this moment, he was using these two terms to express his inspiration for exploring the barrier. The barrier is a door, Leo. It exists in this world, strictly adhering to the triangular theory of magic, matter, and spirit. It maintains the operation of the world. But what we need to do is to open this door. How do we open it? Open it from the heart. This door also exists in our hearts. We are all a part of the world. If we want to be as powerful as the weave dragon, we must open this door and break the triangular theory. We must jump out of the operating system of the world and touch it. Leo landed on the peak of the volcano with Liszt sitting on his back. The afterglow of the setting sun plated the man and dragon with a layer of golden light, making them look like motionless statues. But their hearts were burning, and their magic and fighting chi were also boiling. The materialistic worldview had been deeply imprinted in their minds. Trying to integrate it with the idealistic worldview was no different from completing a self-denial. But this was the only way to improve oneself. Difficult. So difficult. Even if I already understand the true meaning of the barrier, I'm still ignorant as to how to break it. When the sun completely sank into the horizon, he slowly shook his head, but there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. But I've already successfully touched the barrier. Smoke serpentines that he had not seen for a long time floated in front of him. Mission completed. Reward, Fate's favor. The 203rd smoke mission, which was also the smoke mission that had taken the longest time, was finally completed. He had obtained the reward of Fate's favor that he had been looking forward to. At this moment, Liszt already understood the reward of Fate's favor. Because the smoke serpentines in front of him didn't continue to change into new serpentines. Instead, they slowly dissipated. At the same time, a cloud of smoke formed an oval seed in his mind. It didn't look like a seed at all, but Liszt knew that it was a seed. It could also be called a smoke dragon. It represented a brand new divine dragon, the smoke dragon. It was being nurtured in his mind, just like the fire dragon Leo and the water dragon Wuxia that had been nurtured in his body. But the smoke dragon was being nurtured in his mind, slowly absorbing the power of fate. There will be no more smoke missions in the future, however, the power of fate is slowly recovering. I don't know how long it will take for the smoke dragon to be nurtured, but it's clear that I'm the biggest beneficiary. Because I am blessed by fate. The power of fate revolves around me. Everything will go smoothly, and good fortune will continue. At this moment, I am the smoke dragon. He could feel the smoke dragon in his mind. Perhaps because he had been immersed in it for too long, it had already been branded with his own mark. In other words, even if the smoke dragon was nurtured, he wouldn't need to ride it anymore. He even felt that the smoke dragon might not be able to nurture an independent dragon personality. Because unlike the fire dragon Leo and the water dragon Wuxia, all the nutrients of the smoke dragon came from Liszt. There was almost no residual power of the previous generation of smoke dragons. Even the power of fate was gathered through Liszt. He completed missions again and again, strengthening fate again and again. When he said that he was the smoke dragon, he wasn't bragging. It was the truth. Moreover, I can also feel that the birth of this smoke dragon gives me a feeling of suddenly seeing the light of fate. It seems that I can avoid disasters and even stir the threads of fate around me. This is the first time that I have truly grasped this power. He mounted Leo and galloped towards the distant Phoenix City. When he passed by the Phoenix Parasol Tree Forest, he immediately had a flash of inspiration and a wonderful trance came over him. There were 2 Phoenix Parasol trees in the forest. It seemed that as long as he willed it, he could stir the threads of fate and let the 2 trees give birth to sprites. And so he did. It just so happened that the Phoenix Parasol Tree Dragon sprite, Infant, came over riding the fire dragon bird Little Red. Liszt said to Infant, pay attention to these 2 trees at all times and see if they will give birth to sprite worms. Once they do, call me immediately. Infant, who was wearing a small knight leather armor, patted his chest. "Don't worry, leave it to me." Chapter 1072. Phoenix City was an undeveloped city. The main streets of the city had been planned, but the ground had not been broken. Currently, there was only one small city in the endless volcanoes, Parasol City. Parasol City was originally a small town at the edge of the Phoenix Parasol Forest. With the development of the Fire Dragon Potion, this small town welcomed the opportunity to develop. Even the Guild of Magic had set up a branch here. The branch was mainly in charge of gathering potions and refining the Fire Dragon Potion. The Fire Dragon Potion only had one purpose: to supply potions to Leo. The Dragon Elf Infant's cordyceps had a huge area of influence. Phoenix parasol trees had been planted on an area of nearly 60,000 acres. The endless production of Fire Dragon Potions was still unable to satisfy Leo's urgent needs. The volcano super magic produced by the few active volcanoes had also gradually decreased. Thus, Leo's growth had stagnated in the past 2 years. His body length and wingspan were maintained at 65 meters. There was still a long way to go before reaching the mark of adulthood, which was 100 meters in wingspan and body length. "I've already become the controller of fate. The next step is to find more potions similar to the Fire Dragon Potion to help Leo grow." After touring the barren Phoenix City, List thought about how to break the barrier. Now that he had touched the barrier, he understood what it was. It wasn't just the barrier of fire magic. The barrier of other magic attributes, as well as the barrier of matter and spirit, had begun to show signs of forming. But for now, the most promising way to break the barrier was still to cooperate with Leo. It was impossible for a single person to accomplish such an idealistic operation that came out of nothing. When it came to the root of the barrier, this nothingness itself was an extremely harsh condition. Only dragon knights barely met the requirements to create nothingness, to touch and break through the barrier. Perhaps high mages could also touch the barrier, but breaking through it was far too difficult. After all, the magic system behind magic shooters relied on the magic of the Weave Dragon and not their own power. Leo is not an adult, and his power cannot be used to its limit. It's difficult for me to create an environment of nothing, and even more difficult to break this barrier. After coming into contact with the barrier, List gradually had a complete train of thought. Therefore, the most important thing for me to train in the future is to help Leo reach adulthood as soon as possible. The other dragons want to break through the barrier, but they are still at a loss. Even the invisible dragon bard was not his first choice. It was still very difficult to accurately describe the barrier of matter with idealism. He wasn't someone who would bite off more than he could chew. Since he had decided to conquer the fire elemental mana barrier, he would put in all his effort and work with Leo to break the barrier first. Once he had the experience of breaking through the barrier, he would then set off to a new realm with Bard and the other dragons. But no matter what. Right now, I'm no longer just a dragon knight. Although I'm not a barrier knight yet. Perhaps I can call my current state a half-step barrier knight? Although the term half-step stronghold knight sounded a bit melodramatic, it was also an appropriate description of List's current state. The strength of a perfect phase dragon knight was severely restricted. It belonged to the pinnacle of power. List, on the other hand, touched the rampart and understood the principle of creating something out of nothing. His and Leo's power quietly changed. It was a kind of boiling magic power. The speed at which the Supreme Dragon Magic and Supreme Demonic Dragon Do Chi revolved was very fast, and the power that they could unleash was also very great. This was just a change. It was not a qualitative change, but the increase in strength was very obvious. Now, even if I fight a normal dragon alone, there shouldn't be any problem, right? If Leo and I become one with the dragon, I'm afraid no dragon knight will be able to block my attack. The increase in strength gave him endless confidence. In a trance, he could already see himself killing all the enemies and unifying the northeast corner of the legendary continent. He thought. The corner of his mouth could not help but curl up. I'm afraid that the Fire Kingdom will soon become the Fire Empire. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows. Leo let out a deafening roar and turned into a trail of flames, disappearing in the sky above Phoenix City. Let's go, Leo. Let's go back and prepare to be crowned king. Brother, you've changed. At first sight of List in the palace of sun, moon and stars, Achi cried out in surprise. Oh, is that so? Achi, tell me where I've changed. List was also very surprised by Achi's sensitivity. He had just touched the barrier, and he was already noticed. Brother, your temperament has changed. Achi can't describe it, but compared to before, there's a very strange feeling. So, do you think this feeling is good or bad? Of course it's a good change. Oh, that's very good. List smiled proudly. He then held Achi's hand and shared his joy with her. After reading your summary notes, I received a lot of inspiration. So, I went to the volcano and comprehended the true meaning of rampart. He immediately told Achi his understanding of the barrier without reservation. This made Achi want to immediately go back to the laboratory to verify the information. Don't worry, Achi. It's my kingdom's founding ceremony in a few days. You can put aside the trivial matters and share this supreme moment with me. Achi did not like to attend crowded occasions. However, when faced with List's warm invitation, she could not refuse. Okay. Don't always think about work and research. Come, Achi, have a smile. From birth to death, there will always be endless work and research. When it's time to relax, we should relax decisively. Otherwise, when we get old, we will regret the lack of scenery along the way. He took Achi's hand and went to the highest palace room of the palace of sun, moon, and stars. Then, they went up the stairs to a small balcony at the top of the palace room. Standing there, they could overlook the entire Flame Royal City. Do you remember when you first came to the Flower Town and lived in a small castle? Every day, you could only look out the window and admire the small farm? Emichim, Achi remembers. At that time, I was just a countryside baron, and you were just a small siren being chased by sea monsters. However, 6 or 7 years passed in a flash. You became the embodiment of truth walking in the secular world, the arch-wizard, and I became the dragon knight of several dragons. Now, the flame kingdom that we founded together is about to be established. Achi, do you feel a sense of accomplishment? Achi laughed, brother, do you feel a sense of accomplishment? A full sense of accomplishment. List clasped his hands behind his back and gazed into the distance, his lofty sentiments shining brightly. This vast and fertile land is my country, this bustling crowd is my people, all the prosperity and desolation in front of me is my kingdom. List turned around. He looked down at Achi's beautiful face, and then, under Achi's expectant and apprehensive gaze, he kissed the small siren's soft lips. Kingdom and beauty. Only children would do multiple-choice questions. List wanted both. Chapter 1073. The landscape was picturesque, and there were many heroes. Sapphire Calendar Year 158, January 1st. The festive atmosphere was not strong on Flame Island, because all the attention and atmosphere had been replaced by the Flame Kingdom's founding ceremony. When the first ray of sunlight rose in the morning along with the biting cold wind, the Flame Kingdom's royal city was already bustling with activity. All the residents had woken up early and gathered on both sides of the Gilt Avenue. The Gilt Avenue, which had a fence and was covered with a gold-red carpet, led from one end of the city to the other. Toot toot toot, the sound of horns mixed with the sound of musical instruments. It was the palace's band. The nobles here liked the elegant piano played indoors, but that did not mean that other musical instruments were not developed. The palace's band was a mixture of many folk musicians, standing on the float in a square formation and playing. It was a very cheerful song. Soon, a male chorus sounded in the accompaniment of the song. How glorious the bright sunshine is, the sky is clear after the storm, the fresh air makes one's heart flutter, how glorious the bright sunshine is, ah, your eyes are shining, as glorious as the sun, as glorious as the sun, her eyes will always be the most beautiful in my heart. This was a folk song widely spread in the northeast of the legendary continent, my son. The serpentine of the steel ridge, the wind of the eagle, and the rock text of the blast furnace castle all had translations of this folk song. And now, the male chorus was the serpentine version of My Son, which was the official language of the Flame Kingdom. As glorious as the sun, the ordinary residents on both sides of the Gilt Avenue quickly began to sing along with the chorus. Almost everyone could sing such a folk song. When the song ended, the performing group and chorus's float had already driven onto the Gilt Avenue. At this moment, a series of roofless carriages followed behind the float. Nobles dressed in luxurious frac habillés sat on the carriages. Ah, that's Viscount Blair. I know him. He's the administrator of our Flame Kingdom. Behind him is Viscount Isaiah, the administrator of Reed City. When I went to Reed City to do business, I saw Viscount Isaiah inspecting goods. They're all viscounts. Why don't I see any counts or marquises? I heard that the marquises and counts didn't participate in the parade. Today is the enfeoffment ceremony. The nobles will be enfeoffed in the palace. When will I be able to sit in a carriage and receive cheers? Don't even think about it. 366 carriages carrying 366 viscounts passed by ostentatiously. Following the Vicomte's carriage were groups of nobles in frac habillés. But compared to the gorgeous Viscount, they were dressed a little more plainly. This was the Baron's phalanx. 1,240 Baron were all riding fine horses, but there were obvious differences between the types of horses. Some of the Barons were riding tall, strong, and shiny black horses. They were members of the Burning Legion, and their mounts were purebred black blood horses. Some of the Barons were riding shorter black horses. These were the mounts of the noble Barons, and their mounts were mixed black blood horses. There were also some Baron riding brown, yellow, and red horses. Those were the mounts of the lifelong Baron, and the mounts were just ordinary war horses. Although the Barons weren't sitting in the carriages, their majestic posture on the warhorses was even more majestic. Many people on both sides of the Gilt Avenue cheered, especially the daughters of some merchants and craftsmen, who frequently winked at the knight on the horse. They didn't dare to dream of becoming a viscount, but they could still dream of becoming a baron. Behind the baron was the lord's phalanx. Not all of the tens of thousands of lords came. After all, they still had to shoulder the local management work, so only 500 representatives were present. The team of nearly 2,000 people set foot on the Gilt Avenue and kept moving forward. Soon, they arrived at the triumphal arch in the center of the Fire Kingdom. There were mages casting magic on the triumphal arch. Colorful magic rose into the sky, causing the residents of the kingdom to exclaim. It was like fireworks on earth. Not only was it beautiful, but there was no smoke. It was environmentally friendly and natural. Passing through the triumphal arch, they continued along the Gilt Avenue to the north. Soon, the team arrived at the square of the Palace of Stars. The square was next to the Fire Kingdom, and civilians were usually not allowed to enter. However, on this day of celebration, the square was allowed to be open to the public, so a large number of civilians and families of nobles poured in early. In a society with a strict hierarchy, there was an obvious barrier between the nobles and civilians. The nobles gathered in a separate area and kept a distance from the civilians. No civilians dared to cross this gap. Even ignorant children would be pulled back by their parents in time. When the parade team arrived at the square, they had to go through a procedure, which was to park their carriages and horses, and then return to the square to gather. When the sun rose high in the sky, around 9 in the morning, a new round of performances by the orchestra and choir began. At this moment, a large number of nobles, mages, and envoys from various countries poured out of the palace and entered the already prepared grandstand. Among them, there were 3 that made a shocking entrance. Leading the way was Emily Flame, the Light Emerald Dragon Knight. She rode the Light Emerald Dragon Ethan and flew to the palace square. Then, she circled around and landed Ethan in the middle of the square. She jumped off the dragon. Ethan flapped his wings and let out a loud dragon roar. He flew out of the square and landed on the Moon Mountain not far away. Under many admiring and jealous gazes, Emily walked to the grandstand and sat on the seat with her name written on it. Next was the shocking Duke of Tulip Island, Lee William Tulip. He didn't ride his broken-horned storm dragon horse. Instead, he stepped on Nimia's head and walked to the edge of the square. Then, he jumped into the square and sat on his seat. Nimia also let out a roar and squatted on an empty space not far from the square. He stared at the square and gave the crowd endless pressure. The third to appear was magic shooter Laird Truth. He sat cross-legged on a shining golden carpet and flew into the square with his body covered in golden light. In that instant, he used light magic and almost blinded everyone's eyes. When the crowd got used to it, he had already sat down. Obviously. These three's flashy entrance was requested by List to increase the atmosphere for the Fire Kingdom's founding ceremony. It's really grand. Alexander White Iron, the envoy of the Eagle Kingdom, looked at the dragon of his former kingdom, Nimia the Lion, and Magic Shooter. He was full of complaints but couldn't complain. He could only secretly criticize. On the surface, he still had to smile and chat with the envoy of the Blast Furnace Kingdom beside him. I wonder when His Majesty will appear. The envoy of the Blast Furnace Kingdom was just about to reply. Suddenly, a majestic and domineering dragon roar arose from the direction of the palace. The sound seemed to be able to penetrate the sky and earth and instantly silence the entire square. Roar! You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.